In a packed arena, this noob Patrick challenges the reigning champion, Kim Jin-ho, a living legend with a flawless 100% KO record. Patrick's confidence stems from speculation swirling around Kim's recent fights. Observers have noticed that he hasn't been using his legs, leading Patrick to suspect an injury. So tonight, he plans to be crowned as the new champion. As the fight begins, Patrick immediately feels the immense pressure of standing before the greatest fighter alive. But this is exactly what he expected. His plan is simple: target the leg. If Kim is arrogant enough to step into the ring despite an injury, Patrick will make sure he never gets to use that leg again. Patrick quickly rushes in for a tackle, fully committing to his strategy. But just when he thinks he's gained the upper hand, his world turns upside down, literally. In an instant, Kim unleashes a flawless spinning kick, striking with the precision of a master. The impact is devastating. Before Patrick can even process what happened, he's on the ground. The match is over. A shocking first-round knockout. As the dust settles, Kim stands over his fallen opponent. There is no celebration, no taunting. Just a simple statement: now you understand why I don't use my legs. They're just too damn powerful. After the match, Kim refuses to attend the press conference. He has no interest in the media spectacle. The only thing he wants to know is when his next fight is scheduled. Even when his coach offers him a car ride in the stormy weather, Kim declines. His house is 30 kilometers away, but instead of taking a ride, he chooses to run through the traffic, leaving his coach stunned. Back home, Kim logs onto his PC. He isn't watching highlights of his victory or reading the news. Instead, he launches Last Saber, a notoriously difficult game that even Korean players have given up on. For the past 10 years, he has played every single day without missing a session. Fighting, training, pushing himself against stronger opponents. That had once been his life's purpose. But reality had long since caught up with him. There was no one left who could truly challenge him, no one who could entertain him. In the ring, he was invincible. In the game, at least, there was still something that could push him to his limits. With a smirk, he acknowledges that he probably won't beat the game today either, but the thought doesn't discourage him. Instead, it fuels his excitement. As his in-game character, a noble warrior, stands amidst a battlefield engulfed in flames, Kim realizes that here in this virtual world, he can once again feel what he has long lost in real life: the thrill of being a challenger. His opponent is Demon Lord Izar. Kim raises his sword in-game and challenges the boss to come at him. As the battle rages on, Izar's health dwindles, inching closer to zero. This might actually be the time he finally wins. Every strike lands with precision, and the once imposing Demon Lord weakens before his eyes. But something feels off. The thrill of the fight begins to wane as Kim notices subtle yet alarming details. The boss isn't fighting back as fiercely as before. Its once deadly attacks are sluggish, predictable, even failing to dodge the simplest of strikes. The intricate attack patterns that once forced him into grueling, split-second decisions have now become shockingly straightforward. Confusion sets in. Has he improved that much? Or is something fundamentally wrong? Instead of the exhilaration of overcoming a challenge, Kim finds himself grappling with an unexpected, ironic realization. He is no longer fighting to win. He is beginning to fear victory itself. In an attempt to break the unease, he starts to cheer for his opponent, urging Demon Lord Izar to fight back. His voice carries encouragement, but his hands remain relentless, executing flawless maneuvers on the keyboard. Soon a message flashes across the screen. "Congratulations, you have defeated Demon Lord Izar." The game's logo appears, thanking him for playing Last Saber. Kim Jin-ho has conquered not only the real world, but the digital one as well. There is no one left to challenge him. Maybe now he should just try fighting a bear. Then suddenly lightning strikes, and moments later, he finds himself floating in darkness, disoriented. He notes how dizzy he feels, how unnaturally hot his body has become. Then, rain. He questions when he came outside at all. As he starts regaining awareness, a hand grabs his shoulder, calls out to him as number 218. The person confronting him insists they don't have time to waste, he has to get out immediately. Still dazed, Kim looks at the other person's prison number, which is 172, while confusedly asking who he is. All around them, dozens of prisoners sprint through the pouring rain toward an open gate. As the storm rages above, Kim catches sight of a fluttering flag bearing a black eagle-like symbol. He stares at it, trying to recall where he's seen it before. Meanwhile, Number 172 shakes him out of his daze. He urges him to wake up, yelling at him not to throw away this opportunity. He insists that this might be their final chance at escape from Carrion, a name that jolts Kim into full attention. Looking around at the towering stone walls and panicked prisoners bolting for the gates, it all starts to fall into place. This prison, it's the same one from the game. As the rain pours and thunder rumbles, Kim tries to convince himself it's all a dream, but every sensation is too vivid, too real. From the top of the prison walls, prisoners tug at heavy chains, struggling to raise the massive gate. A voice calls out, urging everyone to pull together. Another shout follows, "We're almost there." As the gate begins to creak open, Kim can feel it in his bones. This isn't a dream. He has been transported into the very game he was playing, but what baffles him even more is his role here. He's not a warrior. He's not a champion. He's a prisoner. Kim Jin-ho decides that despite how confusing everything is, his first priority is to escape. He begins running with determination, but then something makes him pause. He grabs the hand of the blonde prisoner beside him and tells her to wait. He questions the situation, asking if she doesn't find it all strange. He calls him crazy and urges him to stay focused, but Kim continues pressing his doubts. He points out that if this truly were the prison carry-on from the game, things wouldn't be unfolding so easily. The security, the lockdown, the sheer disarray, it all feels wrong. He watches as other prisoners easily overpower guards and force the gates open. Something's off. Another prisoner yells out that the reason everything is falling apart is because Warden Clark isn't there. Someone else confirms that the warden left urgently earlier that day, implying that his absence has created this perfect window for escape. It explains the weakness in the system and why now is their best chance. 172 tells Kim to snap out of it and urges him once more to run. But Kim does the opposite. He suddenly pulls him down with him, shocking him. He shouts at him, calling him a madman. Kim, however, is deep in thought. He admits that if everything they're saying is true, the situation starts to make sense. And yet, something still doesn't sit right. Then it hits him. His champion's intuition flares up, warning him urgently. And that instinct screams, "Absolutely do not cross that door." Around them, the rest of the prisoners scream with joy as the massive gate. Warden Clark makes his appearance. Armed and calm, he cuts down the attacker without hesitation. Clark stands firm in the downpour, completely unfazed. A twisted grin stretches across his face as he calls the prisoners vermin and gives a chilling order, "Kill them all." Behind him, an entire squadron of guards stands ready, armed and armored. 172, stunned by the sight, asks aloud why that man is here. Kim, now certain, says it's a trap and yells at him to keep running. Panic replaces celebration as prisoners realize too late what they've walked into, and the so-called escape becomes a death trap. Warden Clark orders his men to line up the remaining prisoners. The guards respond quickly, forcing the exhausted and terrified inmates to stand in formation. Kim and number 172 stand silently, trying not to draw attention. He gets scolded for failing to manage his nausea. The prisoners, even children, are subjected to this ruthless display of power. Warden Clark approaches Kim and mocks him, saying he was lucky. Kim wonders if the others simply lacked the courage to run. Clark continues belittling mages, calling them cowards and claiming they aren't even worthy rivals. He leans in close to Kim and warns him that he'll regret surviving today. Then he calls him by the name Arahan, leaving Kim stunned. Now, a week into prison life, Kim narrates his experience. The only task the prisoners are forced to do is build and rebuild stone towers, a meaningless and exhausting punishment. Through the grueling labor, Kim starts to understand the limits of his new body. It's young, around 15 years old, and extremely weak. So weak that even lifting stones leaves him breathless. At night, he secretly tries to use magic but fails every time. This is confusing to him because Arahan, the name the warden mentioned, is the greatest magic family. It makes no sense that someone from that lineage can't use magic. He wonders if that's why he was abandoned here. While he's lost in thought, a guard yells at him to move the stones again, this time to the other side. More orders follow, urging him to move faster. As synchronization with his new body reaches 78%, Kim wonders when it will be completed. Meanwhile, the harsh reality of prison life continues. During mealtime, Kim observes the poor food quality, barely edible meat and bread. Despite trying to exercise and grow stronger, the terrible food makes progress slow. During a meal, his roommate joins him, noting Kim's habit of skipping the bread. Kim offers it to him, showing a small act of kindness. While most prisoners fear Kim because of his red eyes, his cellmate is different, remaining friendly and close. A rumor surrounds the Arahan family, known as the strongest magic family, and their cursed red eyes. People believe the red eyes are the result of killing too many people, and anyone who meets them will die. This fear has isolated Kim from the others. As Kim reflects, he realizes he and his roommate may have been friends before his possession. However, he's still puzzled by his inability to use magic despite being an Arahan. His cellmate warns him to be careful. Other prisoners are angry at him for working too hard, increasing their workload. Kim now understands why everyone glares at him with such hostility. Kim is warned by his cellmate to watch out for prisoner number 589, the feared boss of the prisoners, known for murder and his brutal past in the fighting arena. Kim realizes the conflict is about to escalate. 589 confronts Kim, blaming him for their increased workload. Calmly, Kim responds, "What if I am?" and provocatively adds that he'll handle it as exercise. As tension peaks, a powerful punch is thrown. Kim counters with a strong blow to the prisoner's face, catching everyone off guard, including the prisoners backing up their boss, number 589. But as Kim takes a defensive stance, he quickly realizes something troubling. The punch he delivered had no real impact. Number 589 grabs Kim by the neck and lifts him off the ground with one hand. Kim thinks to himself, just how weak is this body? 589 throws Kim across the room with monstrous strength, slamming him hard into the floor. The power difference is overwhelming. Kim may have the skills and instincts of a champion, but he's trapped in a fragile 15-year-old's body, one that can't keep up with his will. Kim is slumped against the wall, but the synchronization process that had been mentioned earlier finally completes. A new wave of energy courses through Kim's body. With this new strength, Kim rises, his demeanor now confident and fearless. He is ready for round 2. The boss scoffs at Kim's confidence, laughing and questioning what makes him so sure of himself even after being abandoned by his powerful family. Kim taunts his opponent, asking if he's going to attack. Number 589 charges, launching a furious series of blows, but Kim easily dodges and counters. Despite the earlier hit that left Kim on the ground, he unleashes a powerful kick that sends number 589 flying. Kim mutters that this is exactly why he didn't want to use his legs. It's too overwhelming. The other prisoners, enraged by the defeat of their leader, rally together to attack Kim, shouting threats. However, Kim doesn't flinch. As he casually approaches the unconscious body of number 589, the prisoners suddenly hesitate. A single stomp from Kim sends a strong signal, and when he turns and glares at them, they freeze in place. After overpowering the gang leader in front of the other inmates, Kim takes control of the situation by threatening to permanently disable the gang leader if the others come any closer. He demands they call a guard, intimidating the rest of the prisoners into backing off. One of them nervously agrees to fetch the guards. Kim's boldness leaves the gang stunned, but he coolly retorts that he's the one in charge now. Later, his blonde roommate, amazed by Kim's dominance, asks where he learned to fight like that. Kim brushes it off, and his friend notices something odd. Kim seems taller than before. Kim realizes that the synchronization between his real-life stats and the in-game body has finally completed, which explains his physical change. However, he notes that even though his strength is higher now, it still feels like a child's compared to his real self. Suddenly, a real stat window appears in front of Kim. It reveals his identity as Zed Arahan, class Mage, with powerful characteristics like poison immunity and champion soul. However, the shocking twist is that his magic power stat is 0. Kim is stunned. How can a mage from the greatest magic family have no magic at all? Kim angrily questions how the system gave him such a trash build. He reflects on how the previous owner of the body was abandoned by his family, likely for being slow-witted. Trying to stay calm, Kim reviews the stats again. Although his magic is 0, the rest of his attributes, strength, agility, health, and perception, are all maxed out at 100, which he considers lucky in the bigger picture. However, due to a growth penalty, his weak body can't fully utilize the benefits of those high stats. Kim concludes he'll need to build up his physical condition through training to unlock the full potential. He notes the poor diet in prison, but is intrigued by the unique S-rank characteristics he possesses, many of which he's never encountered in the game before. The only familiar ones are immunity to all poisons and immortal fighter. He laments how the character could have been overpowered, if not for the 0 magic power. Still, he's determined to figure things out gradually and believes the magic issue isn't unsolvable. Just then, the prison announces for certain inmates to step outside, as the guards call out inmate numbers 114, 456, 891, and 2918, number 172 size, muttering that it's happening again. Curious, Kim asks who those people are. 172 explains that they're death row inmates, heading out for their final meal, a privilege granted before execution. This sparks an idea in Kim, prompting him to ask 172 for his real name. 172 admits they wouldn't know each other's names since they're always called by numbers, and introduces himself as Lu, a street kid with no family name. Z responds with his full name, Zed Arahan. So from now on I will call him Z as in Dragon Ball Z. Z then asks Lu if he wants to escape the prison, to which Lu says without hesitation that he has his own reasons. When Z inquires if Lu has a plan, Lu explains that the only exit is through the main gate and the key is in the possession of the warden. Z proposes that they steal the key, but Lu thinks the idea is insane. The warden, Clark, may be retired, but he's a Fifth Circle knight, notoriously powerful and known for his hatred of mages. In the world of Burst Sane, knights and mages are natural enemies. Even Z doubts he could take on someone like that, at least for now. Still, Z insists there's another way. Theft. Lu, having grown up on the streets, understands immediately. Pickpocketing is second nature to him, but with so many eyes always on the warden, he never got a chance. Z, however, begins forming a plan. It's still rough, but he now has a clear idea of how they might just escape this place. As the prisoners are gathered under the blazing sky, a loud command signals the start of the day's labor. The guard announces that, by the warden's orders, the workload is being increased from that day forward. Prisoners are ordered to run instead of walk, sparking outrage among them. They protest, demanding reasonable conditions and expressing frustration at the constant escalation. In response, the guard coldly brandishes his blade and warns them against questioning the warden's orders, stating that complaints should be taken up with the warden himself. Tensions rise as the guard chillingly hints at who's to blame for their situation, his gaze landing squarely on Z. The atmosphere thickens as Z steps forward, surrounded by murmurs and watchful eyes. The guard, feigning indifference, excuses himself to go smoke, making it clear that whatever happens next is being allowed to unfold. Lu nervously comments on the uneasy tension, but Z calmly tells him to stay far away. Internally, Z realizes that Warden Clark is intentionally trying to provoke the prisoners into starting a riot. Since Clark can't eliminate Z directly, he's using the inmates as pawns. Z, who knows full well the extent of the knight's hatred for mages, sees through the scheme and is disgusted that a man once considered honorable would stoop to such tactics. Lu rushes across the yard, fully aware that this time the guards are involved in whatever scheme is unfolding. Unlike before, they can't afford to sit back and let things happen. He's determined Z must not die. Meanwhile, a group of inmates decide they must kill Z to protect themselves. As they move in, Z calmly addresses them, acknowledging that they're acting out of necessity. But their response is hostile, mocking his lineage and charging at him with full intent to kill. Z doesn't back down. Instead, he dives into the fight, launching a clean kick to the face of one of the attackers. Z uses the brawl as a way to vent his own frustrations, calling for everyone to attack him at once. As the crowd charges, Z reflects on his days in the octagon, having fantasized about a moment like this, facing multiple opponents simultaneously. Now, that fantasy has become his brutal reality, and he's ready for it. Z unleashes his full power in the brawl, completely immersed in the thrill of combat. He shouts that this is exactly the feeling he's been craving. Z charges through the crowd of inmates, landing devastating blows one after another, clearly outmatching them in strength and technique. Meanwhile, Lu watches in awe, barely believing what he's seeing as Z dominates the battlefield. Just then, a larger inmate approaches Lu from behind. Back in the fight, Z delivers a crushing kick, sending another opponent flying, as the other prisoners panic and urge one another to keep attacking all at once. But Z is unfazed. He's exhilarated. He enjoys the adrenaline rush of dodging incoming attacks and the satisfaction of landing powerful counterstrikes. This is why he got addicted to fighting in the first place. With a crazed expression, he demands even more. Suddenly, a large foot slams down, and a new presence calls out to him. Another powerful inmate, 245, enters the scene, holding Lu hostage. He mocks Z and tells him to value his friends more, threatening Lu's life. Z's expression turns cold and deadly. As 245 taunts him, calling him trash, Z warns that they just made a very big mistake. Z calls the enemy trash and prepares to face off. Lu, meanwhile, is being choked and taunted by one of the attackers, who reveals himself as a second circle knight and mocks Z's lack of magic. The knight lunges at Z, convinced he's defenseless, but Z suddenly vanishes with a burst of speed, leaving everyone confused. Moments later, Z reappears beside Lu, having already dealt with some of the enemies. The other inmates are shocked and demand to know how Z used magic despite having zero magic power. With a confident smile, Z clarifies it wasn't magic, just raw speed and strength. He launches into a a fierce, acrobatic assault, flipping over enemies and delivering devastating blows one after another until the warden arrives. The prison chief confronts Z, demanding an explanation for the chaos. Lu, 172, immediately jumps to Z's defense, explaining that Z was the victim. He was attacked and only acted in self-defense. The chief coldly assesses the scene, calling the other prisoners idiots as he surveys the bodies sprawled around Z. He then asks Z a single-pointed question: "Did you release your mana?" Z, with a nonchalant expression, simply replies, "Who knows?" The chief, unconvinced, releases his intimidating aura, an overwhelming force of a fifth circle knight. The aura floods the yard with oppressive pressure, instantly choking out the other prisoners, including Lu, who falls to his knees gasping for breath. Yet Z stands completely unaffected. The chief is visibly stunned. Normally, no ordinary person could stand under a fifth circle knight's aura. What he sees before him defies reason. Z's mysterious resistance is explained when the system screen reveals that his trait, Champion's Noble Soul S, grants immunity to suppression. The chief, witnessing this for the first time, is left in disbelief. Speculation arises that this may even be a mental immunity trait, further emphasizing the uniqueness and broken nature of Z's ability. Z internally acknowledges his peak strength from his previous world and remarks that being overpowered by a mere fifth circle knight would be ridiculous. The aura clash continues, but Z stands unshaken within his blue energy field, while everyone else struggles to breathe. The warden wonders how Z could remain unaffected. Meanwhile, his subordinates, overwhelmed by the aura as well, beg him to stop. Begrudgingly, the chief lets out a frustrated TCH, forced to accept that Z is unlike any prisoner he's dealt with before. After overpowering the fifth circle knight's aura, Z remains calm and casually reflects that it's a good thing the situation ended the way it did. Had he drawn his sword, things could have turned into a real disaster. As the guards begin to reassert control and order the prisoners back to work, Z interrupts, saying he has something to say. He expresses his boredom with the repetitive labor of stacking stones and the constant stress of being targeted by other inmates. Then, in a shocking turn, Z declares that he's decided to stop living, clarifying that he intends to become a death row inmate. This stuns both his companion and the prison chief. The chief warns Z about the gravity of such a decision, stating that if it's just a passing whim, there will be consequences. But Z remains unfazed, confidently offering to record his statement in a crystal orb for proof. The chief, smirking, admits that would indeed be sufficient evidence, acknowledging Z's boldness and determination. The warden, intrigued by Z's bold request to become a death row inmate, orders the guards to quickly bring a crystal orb to formally record the decision. Z smirks, remarking that the warden must be enjoying this spectacle. Then, as part of his final meal rites, Z expresses his desire to choose the menu himself, an innocent-sounding request until he names the dish. He shocks the surrounding guards by demanding the finest meat raised on the Berti Plains in the southern part of the empire, a legendary delicacy known throughout Last Saber. It's said to be so delicious that it reinvigorates those who eat it, giving warriors the strength to win upcoming battles. In the game, it was even a key item to bribe certain NPCs during quests. Z justifies his extravagant request by saying that since he has a major fight ahead, he wants to eat properly while he still can, and also because he's always wanted to try it at least once. He reasons that if this is the price of his life, then it's not an unreasonable demand. To make things clear, Z states he won't accept anything below S-grade quality. If they try to trick him with a lesser version, he'll cancel the entire thing. Lu is stunned by Z's decision to go through with the death penalty, but becomes even more shocked when Z casually adds that Lu will be joining him. Z requests enough food for both of them so they can eat their fill, leaving Lu completely blindsided by being roped into the situation. Still, the warden agrees to Z's terms, stating that taking an Arahan's life is no small matter and deserves at least this level of respect. Z, pleased by the warden's understanding, shares a moment of mutual acknowledgement, but Lu, still in disbelief, wonders why no one is asking for his opinion in all this. While the rare Berti mountain beef took a week to arrive, Z didn't waste a moment. Exempt from prison labor during this time, he focused solely on training, receiving meals from the guards. Lu, confused, watched as Z trained rigorously despite supposedly being on death row. Z internally revealed the reason. Since all his stats, strength, agility, endurance, and perception, were already maxed out at 100, any new experience points he earned would automatically be redirected into his only lacking stat, mana, which was currently at 0. This was his hidden plan all along. Finally, the day arrived. A guard summoned both Lu and Z, signaling that their final meal was ready. Z enthusiastically exclaimed that this was it. his final moment. The luxurious meal, filled with the finest cuts of bear tea beef, was served in all its mouth-watering glory. Lu, overwhelmed by the taste, said she had never eaten anything this good before, to which Z smugly reminded her that it was all thanks to him. But it wasn't just delicious, it was powerful. The effects were immediate and potent, lifting several of Z's experience penalties and flooding him with previously blocked experience points. While Lu happily ate, Z, now with a glint of determination in his red eyes, mentally checked off his first objective and prepared for the next step. Meanwhile, the warden received word that the feast had begun. Calmly seated in his office, he ordered that no one be allowed to disturb them, showing just how seriously he was taking Z's impending confrontation. As the feast begins, the warden sits in quiet contemplation, recalling the day Z resisted his aura. Something about that moment still lingers in his mind. Z didn't appear to be straining under pressure. In fact, he looked completely unfazed, as though the oppressive aura of a fifth circle knight had no effect on him whatsoever. This bothers the warden deeply. Even though he's retired, he knows full well the kind of power he still holds. There should be no way a young mage, especially one who supposedly can't use mana, could endure his aura so casually. He becomes determined to confirm the truth behind what happened that day, believing something was clearly off and vowing to return the humiliation he felt tenfold. Back in the dining area, Z and Leo have just finished their extravagant meal. Leo, stuffed and amazed, praises the food as the best he's ever had, while Z, smiling slyly, reminds him it was all thanks to him. With the bear tea mountain beef completely devoured, Z remarks that now he could die without regrets. But then he changes tone, saying he feels more alive and energetic than ever, ready to punch a sandbag all day. The meat's effects weren't just taste-based. It removed some of the stat penalties holding Z back, flooding him with stored-up experience points. With that rush of power, he declares his first objective complete and sets his sights on the next. As the door creaks open dramatically, Z turns to Leo, eyes burning with excitement, saying he wants to test his strength right away. And just then, the warden appears in the doorway, finally arriving for what is surely the next phase of Z's plan. As Z and Lu finish their extravagant meal, the warden finally arrives. Z casually informs him that there's no food left, jokingly asking if he's mad for not saving any. This blatant disregard only fuels the warden's irritation. Internally, he scoffs at Z's arrogance, chalking it up to a superiority complex from his bloodline. But beneath the surface, the warden is seething and activates a magic tool embedded in his wrist. With a glowing light, he reaches out and grabs Z by the shoulder, intending to make him suffer for humiliating him previously. He sneers, calling Z's face annoying, vowing to crush him with pain. The warden reflects on Z's bloodline, realizing he may be a member of the elite Arahan family, known for its magical prowess. Even a sliver of information about them could be a ticket out of this lowly post. Driven by ambition, he unleashes the full power of his tool, thinking it'll be enough this time. Purple lightning crackles around him as he boasts, asking Z what he thinks of the overwhelming power and declaring confidently that no matter what Z tries, this time, he won't be able to win. Unfazed by the warden's magic tool and overwhelming aura, Z stares down the warden, shocking him once again. The warden reacts in rage and confusion, demanding to know what kind of power Z possesses. As his magic wraps around the room in intense waves, Z calmly blocks an incoming strike meant for Lu, shielding him from the warden's wrath. The warden, furious, calls Z an insolent fool and attacks him with full force using his magical tool. But Z remains steady. With a sigh, he taps the warden's glowing wrist device and tells him off, demanding that if he's going to be executed, it should be done legally, not in a fit of madness. The warden is left stunned, unable to comprehend how Z is still standing after all that force, especially with a magic tool in play. He starts to realize that if his magic has absolutely no effect on Z, then Z must be at least one circle above him. The thought sends chills down his spine as he begins to question, could Z be a sixth circle mage? Doubt gnaws at the warden until a terrifying thought takes root. Could this be the power of the Arahan bloodline? The realization hits hard. The warden spent his entire life reaching the fifth circle, and yet he can't even force this young prisoner to kneel. Humiliated, the warden shuts down his magic tool. Z, still composed and standing tall, sarcastically asks if he's done digging his own grave. The warden, silent and shaken, finally regains some composure and declares that the execution will proceed the next morning. He coldly reminds Z that even the great Arahan family is not above the Emperor's law and wishes him a grim final night. Later, in his office, the warden reflects on the strange day as he scribbles in his journal. Though he couldn't gather much, he believes the intel he's recorded about Z might prove useful to other knights. He still doesn't understand how Z could resist him so completely, but he suspects there's more to the Arahan family than the world knows. Exhausted from fully unleashing his mana and even using a magic tool, the warden pushes through the fatigue to document the day's events. Meanwhile, back in the prison cell, Leo wakes up, groggy and nauseous from the aftermath of the magical attack. Z checks on him, complimenting his dexterity. Leo, still smiling despite feeling ill, proudly reveals that he managed to steal the keys during the chaos and asks Z how he did. Z acknowledges his effort, noting that for an ordinary person, what Leo did was quite dangerous. But he also silently recognizes that Leo is stronger than he looks. Leo admits it was only possible because the warden was distracted by Z and asks again if Z is truly okay. Z assures him he's fine, although Leo remains skeptical, feeling like there's something he's missing. Z, brushing off the concern, sarcastically suggests that Leo try lifting more stones to figure it out. Then, Z shifts the topic. Arahan's stats and traits are displayed, revealing powerful S-rank attributes like Poison Immunity, Immortal Gambler, and Archmage's Blessing. Despite having all physical stats maxed at 100, growth penalties reduce their effective values by 40 points each. Still, Z has managed to improve his strength, agility, and endurance by 10 points. He notes that the food was not only delicious but also highly nutritious, complementing his consistent training. Z can feel the difference. His senses have sharpened, and he reflects on the challenge of removing the remaining penalties. Later, Z tells Ryu that they'll escape tonight and to rest until then, though Ryu expresses concern that the warden may catch on. Z confidently replies that the warden should already be knocked out. When asked how he can be so certain, Z explains that the bracelet the warden used is a low-tier trinket that temporarily boosts magic, but causes severe fatigue afterward. As expected, the warden is shown collapsed in his office. Z smirks, realizing that, with the bracelet's side effects and the key the warden had brought, his plan just became significantly easier to execute. As night falls, Z decides it's time to act and begins his escape with Ryu. Although Ryu expresses fear and hesitation, he insists on staying close to Z, whom he sees as his lifeline. When they reach a locked room with no key, Z effortlessly kicks the door open, stunning Ryu with his immense strength and causing him to question whether Z is truly just a mage. Their noise attracts the attention of patrolling guards, who quickly spot them and demand answers. Z, unfazed, responds with a calm retort, further shocking Ryu with his composure. The guards raise the alarm, shouting that the prisoners are escaping and to alert the warden immediately. Z and Ryu take off running through the prison corridors, dodging detection. As they sprint ahead, Ryu shouts a warning about something up ahead, the front gate already sealed and heavily guarded by prison soldiers. Determined to get them through, Z instructs Ryu to keep running no matter what happens. Despite his fear, Ryu agrees, trusting Z completely. Z charges ahead into the soldiers, skillfully dodging attacks and unleashing powerful strikes. His enhanced senses and strength allow him to overwhelm the guards with ease. Z continues his assault, taking out several guards with swift, precise strikes. His strength and combat skills shock Ryu, who watches in disbelief. Meanwhile, the warden silently observes the fallen guards and the breached gate, realizing that Z, inmate 218, has successfully escaped. Enraged by the failure, the warden commands the entire facility to find Z immediately. Z and Ryu make it to a small village called Mata, which is close to the detention center. Hiding inside barrels to avoid detection, they confirm they've successfully shaken off their pursuers. When asked about their location, Z explains that this is the only nearby village and they'll have to blend in to avoid getting caught, as other cities are too far away. Ryu rummages through some discarded belongings and finds rags for disguises, suggesting they dress as beggars to avoid suspicion. Z agrees, emphasizing the abundance of beggars in the area, making the disguise practical. Ryu volunteers to gather supplies and confidently brushes off the need for money, much to Z's surprise. Z notes how Ryu has a very different way of thinking, but trusts him enough to let him go. Before leaving, Ryu reassures Z that he's his lifeline, a comment that lingers with Z. An hour later, Ryu returns, revealing he acquired colored contact lenses. He explains that red eyes, a symbol of the Arahan bloodline, could attract dangerous attention, especially in the southern territory of the Bahal family, where blue lenses are more common and stylish. Now disguised and with Z's appearance altered, the two are better equipped to blend in and continue hiding. Z reflects on the Bahal family, recognizing it as deeply familiar to him, since in the game he used to play, his main character was Torres Bahal. He recalls how the Arahan clan represents mages while the Bahal family is tied to swordsmen, and how these two bloodlines are essentially polar opposites in worldview and even eye color. color. As the two fugitives, Z and Ryu, settle into a makeshift shelter in the woods, Z finds himself questioning the surreal turn of his life, from waking up in a game as a prisoner to hiding in a stable for rest. Despite his growing awareness of the danger surrounding him, especially from being targeted by Clark, he notes how Ryu clings to him like a lifeline. Although Z still doesn't know much about Ryu beyond him being a pickpocket, he chooses to keep him close for now out of necessity. Meanwhile, Ryu also lies awake, wondering whether Z is someone he can truly trust. The next morning, as sunlight spills into their modest hideout, Z realizes just how rough their sleeping conditions really were. Ryu yawns and teases Z about how uncomfortable the place must be for a noble like him. Z responds sarcastically, saying no one would like a place like that. Still, he acknowledges the need to compromise in their situation. Realizing they need to eat, Z declares he must find a way to earn money. Ryu questions how they'll manage that while avoiding the guards, and even jokingly suggests Z try pickpocketing. Z brushes that idea off and instead tells Ryu to find a specific place, the arena. The scene shifts to an underground arena, filled with fiery torches and a roaring crowd watching two brawlers locked in an intense fight. Z and Ryu arrive, blending into the wild audience. Ryu, unsure, asks Z if this is really where they should be, to which Z confidently affirms. As the brutal match continues, Z watches with calm, quiet intent, clearly with a goal in mind for being there. The brutal underground fight continues as a powerful fighter lands a devastating blow, stunning the crowd with his sheer strength. Spectators shout in excitement, betting on the match and urging the fighters to take each other down without mercy. Z watches closely, having originally dismissed the arena as a place for low-level brawls, but he quickly reassesses after witnessing the skill on display. Beside him, Lu grows increasingly anxious, urging Z to leave, sensing how dangerous the environment truly is. The tension spikes as one fighter takes down his opponent, prompting Lu to react in shock. He realizes that in this place, taking a life means nothing, and notes that Ika's, the reigning fighter, is even more formidable than the carry-on prisoners they once feared. Observing Ika's strength, Lu tells Z there's no way to beat him with grappling alone. As the match ends, the crowd gasps, and Z makes his move, stepping forward and stopping the killer mid-beatdown. "That's enough," he says calmly, drawing a stark contrast between himself and the bloodthirsty crowd, signaling that he's not there to play by their rules. Z, still disguised as a beggar, shocks Lu and the crowd by suddenly stepping up into the arena after the previous brutal match ends. Lu panics, questioning Z's sanity for climbing into the ring and confronting the referee, accusing him of letting the brutality continue unchecked. Z then directly challenges the previous victor, prompting the man to demand his identity. With calm confidence, Z responds that he's just a nameless street rat, a no one, instantly causing confusion and disbelief among the spectators. The crowd, angry at the interruption, heckles him for ruining the match and demand their money back. Undeterred, the bloodied fighter offers to take responsibility by continuing the match and asks for confirmation that all he needs to do is fight. Z, smirking, promises to put on a good show. Lu, horrified and yelling his name, tries to warn him. He frantically explains that the man Z is about to fight is the strongest in the arena and it's suicide to challenge him. Despite Lu's desperate pleading for Z to pick someone else, Z looks determined, ready to face the impossible. Z tells Lu to shut up and bet everything on him, exuding total confidence as Lu panics, urging him to get down before it's too late. Z ignores his concern, casually calling out to Lu and telling him that after this, they'll go eat steak and stuff themselves. Lu begs him not to jinx it. The match officially starts. Ika's, Z's opponent, steps forward confidently while the crowd chants his name. However, his expression changes as he studies Z. Despite Z's young appearance, Ika's notices his calm, controlled breathing and focused stance, which are nothing like the other fighters. There's no wasted movement. Z's presence is composed yet intimidating. Ika starts to feel unease, questioning why he, a seasoned and brutal fighter, would feel anxious against someone who appears to be just a street beggar. Frustrated by this unsettling feeling, he charges at Z with a furious roar, trying to silence the discomfort by overpowering him through sheer force. Z deals a clean, devastating blow to Ika's, stunning the crowd and shocking Ika's himself, who begins bleeding and faltering. Z then coolly explains proper punching form and technique, essentially giving a lesson mid-fight. He emphasizes precision, speed, and power, demonstrating each concept flawlessly as he lands more hits. Lu, watching from the crowd, is in disbelief, praying desperately for Z's safety. Meanwhile, The spectators are stunned, wondering if Ikaz is holding back, unable to believe what they're witnessing. But it becomes clear Z is dominating. His form, calm breathing, and intimidating stance have flipped the entire atmosphere. Even Ikaz, a seasoned arena fighter, feels uneasy and questions his own confidence. Lu's shock turns into awe as he starts to believe the impossible. Z might actually win. Ikaz's questions show he could be losing to someone he views as just a kid. Z slams Ikaz down with a devastating final blow, leaving the champion unconscious on the ground. Z turns to the stunned referee and calls him out, questioning the lack of rules. The ref, flustered, declares the match over. Z is announced the winner. After his swift and decisive victory, Z raises his hand in calm confidence, internally noting that the fight ended before he even got warmed up and wondering if he should have held back a bit more. Later, Z vents his frustration at the meager payout, despite the odds having been 62-1. He accuses the payout handler of trying to scam him because of his young appearance. The man nervously denies it, claiming he gave the correct amount. Lu also expresses doubt, saying there's no way the payout should be this low. Suspicious, Z questions Lu about how much he bet. Lu sweats nervously, clearly not having bet everything despite Z's instruction. Lu sheepishly confesses that he hates gambling and needed to save some money for dinner. As they're discussing this, a mysterious woman in a red dress, accompanied by 2 bodyguards, approaches them. She greets them flirtatiously and proposes a little chat. Z and Lu immediately get a strange feeling. Z recognizes her as someone the earlier referee seemed to acknowledge with respect. When Z asks who she is, she confidently introduces herself as Herna, the manager of the arena. After Z shuts down Herna's offer for a conversation, he walks away with Lu, who's stunned to realize the woman they encountered is Herna, the arena manager. They are soon blocked by 2 towering bodyguards, but Z fearlessly warns them they could end up like Ikaz if they try anything. Despite their silence, Z senses their loyalty or fear holds them back. Herna, observing from behind, calmly reminds Z that Ikaz was a powerful champion she scouted from the big cities, subtly threatening the weight of his actions. Still intrigued, she lets them go for now, hinting at a future meeting and expressing her fascination with strong people. Later, at a tavern, Lu cautions Z, emphasizing that Herna isn't just a manager, she's the real power behind the city. Z casually calls her a greedy old fox, which Lu confirms is actually her well-known nickname. Reflecting on their encounter, Z becomes more serious, realizing Herna likely approached him with an agenda, planning to use his strength for her own ends. In Z's past life, back when he first entered the world of combat sports, he recalls the moment he started gaining recognition. Numerous management agencies tried to recruit him, though most only saw his potential as a way to profit, often conning him in the process. Young and full of dreams, Z was just a naive country boy at the time. Fortunately, he eventually met a good manager by sheer luck, someone who believed in him and helped him rise to the status of champion. Z acknowledges that he's no longer that same vulnerable kid. He's battled through hardship and earned the title of champion with his own fists. Back in the present, Z silently challenges Herna's subtle manipulation, inwardly calling her an old fox and vowing to see who really knows how to play the game. Their conversation is cut short by the arrival of food, specifically a dish that Lu Ril is excited about, high-grade Verdi beef. However, Z immediately grows suspicious, halting Lu from eating. On closer inspection, Z points out that the beef's color and marbling are off. It's a fake. Lu is shocked, unable to even grasp what marbling is. Z continues analyzing the situation, pointing out how verdigrade beef is a rare luxury. He notes that even someone as high-ranking as the warden in the detention center had to wait a week to get some. It makes no sense for a random restaurant to serve it so casually to so many customers. Z suspects that it's actually wagey-grade beef, just one tier below, but with a significant difference. He suggests checking the price to confirm the scam. Lu, clearly starving, tries to justify the situation by saying it probably doesn't matter if the meat is wagey grade or verdigrade, since it would all taste the same once eaten. He's too hungry to care about the difference. But Z isn't letting it slide. He stands up and tells Lu that charging for verdigrade beef while serving fake meat is outright fraud. He reminds Lu that they're broke and insists that as customers, they have every right to call out the scam. As they're discussing, a server interrupts, politely but firmly asking them to eat quickly and leave, since they've only ordered one serving but are taking up space. Z calmly responds that this isn't what they ordered and reiterates that he specifically asked for verdigrade beef. He questions why the restaurant would try to serve fake meat instead of just bringing the real thing and mentally notes the absurdity of not only being served a fake but also being rushed out. The waiter, getting defensive, challenges Z by asking if he even knows where he is and suggests that such talk might work in the streets but not here. Z cuts him off and instructs him to go get the owner, which prompts the waiter to mutter about Z's fearlessness. Z, pushing the matter further, sarcastically asks if that means he should just say whatever he wants. Around them, the restaurant's customers begin to murmur, wondering if a fight is breaking out. Frustrated, the waiter gives in and tells Z to shut up and come with him. They're led into a back room where the waiter announces to someone that he's brought them. Suddenly, a group of intimidating men storms in, brandishing cleavers. One of them asks if Z is the brat causing all the trouble. Z replies with biting sarcasm, pointing out that the real brat is the one selling fake meat. The boss of the establishment laughs and says he admires Z's confidence but warns him that he really ought to learn how to read the room. Suddenly, the henchmen charge at Z and Lu, but Z leaps into action. In a flurry of powerful, precise strikes, Z dismantles the attackers one by one. The boss, watching with growing horror, flinches and trembles as the sounds of the fight echo. Soon, Z is seen standing amid the battered bodies of the thugs, victorious and unfazed. Lu proudly declares that the attackers deserved it and questions if they even know who Z is. He reminds them this is the guy who defeated Ika's barehanded. The boss, shaken, thinks to himself that he'd heard rumors of someone beating Ika's, but dismissed them as a joke. Now he realizes they were true. He gives in and asks Z what he wants. Z smirks and says they're finally getting somewhere. He insists he's a fair man and offers two conditions. First, he demands the money that was scammed from them be returned. Second, he states that from now on, all their beef meals should be covered, at vertigrade prices, of course. The boss is stunned, wondering just what kind of shakedown is this? Late at night, under a quiet crescent moon, Lu throws himself onto a soft bed with a loud cheer, marveling at how it's the softest thing he's ever slept on. He stretches out gleefully and calls the experience heaven. From the other bed, he excitedly tells Zed that what he did back there was amazing, mentioning consumer rights, and jokingly implying Zed must have noble blood. Zed, settling into bed, explains that if bad rumors spread, the restaurant could be done for. He says that without leverage, negotiation becomes a nightmare for the other side. This thought triggers Lu to burst into laughter, remembering how red the restaurant owner's face got. He thanks Zed and says they're now living like royalty. Zed, tired, tells him to get some sleep. After the lights are off, Lu lies in bed for a while, eyes wide open. He quietly says Zed's name and sits up, trying to see if he's awake. When he gets no response, he softly whispers again, asking if Zed is awake, then quietly puts on his scarf and sneaks out of the room. Zed, though still in bed, is clearly awake, his eyes open slightly, watching Lu leave in silence. A few days later, Leo groans about how hungry he is and asks when dinner will be ready. Noticing Z still training, he comments in disbelief that Z never seems to stop, not even for a second. He finds it especially strange, since mages usually hate sweating more than death itself. Curious, he wonders aloud if Z is working out so hard because he has no mana. Z admits that it's something like that. Leo presses him, asking what's wrong. Z explains that no matter what he does, nothing changes. He checks his status window multiple times a day, but the results remain the same. It's frustrating to the point he started wondering if he's cursed. He reflects that the reason it's so hard is probably because going from 0 to 1 is like trying to create something out of nothing. Once he crosses that threshold, things should get easier. With a sigh, Z wishes Leo good morning, finally finished with his training and ready to eat. Leo asks what they should have today, potato salad or chicken stew, but Z suggests something heavier, something they haven't had in a while. Even Leo perks up at the idea, instantly thinking of the steakhouse. They hadn't gone back in 3 days, not because of money, but because even extortion has its limits. Besides, they had already devoured 10 servings on the first day. Z then asks how much gold they have left. Leo admits, not much. Prices in this city are ridiculous. That doesn't sit right with Z. He's played this game for 10 years. He knows the market rates. Blowing through 50 gold coins in just a few days shouldn't be possible unless someone was actively throwing money away. He begins to suspect Leo might be hiding something. Maybe it's just simple greed or some kind of gambling habit. Z doesn't think Leo intends to betray him, so for now, he decides to look the other way and let him skim a little. But he knows he can't ignore it forever. If he at least understood the reason behind it, maybe it would be easier to deal with. Back at the steakhouse, one of the guards informs the boss that Z and Leo have returned, much to the owner's shock. The steakhouse boss, a man with pride far exceeding his actual skill or status, is still reeling from the humiliation he previously suffered at the hands of a mere brat. He can't wrap his head around the fact that someone so insignificant managed to put him in such a degrading position. Trying to regain some control, the boss turns to his guard and asks if he brought what was requested. Meanwhile, Z and Leo are welcomed inside and led to a table where a lavish spread of meat awaits them. A staff member politely tells them that they've prepared a generous amount and encourages them to eat to their heart's content. Leo, impressed by the feast, wonders how much all this food must be worth. The staff member adds that if they need anything else, they shouldn't hesitate to ask. Z, however, grows suspicious. He wonders why they're suddenly being treated so well. Leo jokes that maybe it's because they changed clothes. Z finds that unlikely. He had already scanned the area when they entered, and everything seemed normal. No signs of an ambush, no irregularities with the restaurant. But still, something feels off and he can't figure out what they're really up to. As Z sits quietly observing, Leo picks up one of the dishes and teases Z about not eating yet. Smiling, he offers a piece of meat wrapped carefully, saying he made it just for Z and urges him to eat it in one bite. Z thanks him but internally decides to remain on guard, hoping that whatever plot is brewing will eventually show itself. Then, without warning, something clicks in Z's mind, an alarming realization. His eyes widen in horror as he urgently yells at Leo to spit out the food and warns him not to eat the meat. Leo starts feeling unwell, especially after hearing Z reveal that the delicious meat he'd been devouring moments ago was laced with poison. Panic creeps in as Leo wonders aloud if he's going to die. Z reassures him, saying the amount consumed is too small to be fatal. Still, Z hadn't expected the steakhouse to go so far as to poison their food. He had already been wary of their overly generous treatment, but the use of poison caught even him off guard. Fortunately, Z immediately recognized the substance as frog's poison through his status window and wasn't affected due to his poison immunity trait. Without it, he admits, he would have been done for without ever realizing it. That immunity hadn't come easy either. It was earned through extreme effort, having risked death multiple times. The trait could only be acquired by consuming every known poison in the Empire in ranked order and surviving each by repeatedly using antidotes. Leo, meanwhile, is in disbelief. He says the meat had no strange taste or smell, so he still isn't sure if it was truly poisoned. He then asks how Z could even tell, guessing that it must be because he's an Arahan, an elite noble who, in Leo's eyes, are on a whole different level. With that thought in mind, Leo nervously asks what their next move is. Since it seems like someone is trying to kill them, he suggests they should just run. But his body feels weak and his panic is rising. Z isn't convinced they should flee. He tells Leo that there's no reason to run. Instead, he plans to make the steakhouse pay severely. Meanwhile, we see the steakhouse owner grumbling to himself, irritated that Z and Leo didn't just eat the meat quietly when they returned. He complains about them acting high and mighty and ordering people around. Back in the dining room, Z calmly says he simply came to clear up a few misunderstandings and has some questions of his own. The owner, observing how much they've already eaten in a short time, waits smugly for the poison to take effect. He then scoffs at Z, asking what misunderstandings he's talking about, since from his perspective, Z and Leo are nothing but robbers using threats to extort money. Z points out that itself as the misunderstanding and invites the steakhouse owner to eat some meat together as a gesture of reconciliation. Leo offers the man a meat wrap, prompting surprise. The owner asks why they're giving it to him. Z responds that if he accepts it, he'll remove one of the conditions they previously demanded, emphasizing again that they're not robbers. The owner immediately refuses the offer and says he has no intention of reconciling. Z, unfazed, remarks that it's odd he would pass up the opportunity, unless there's another reason he can't eat the meat. Z then stares him down and suggests maybe it's because there's poison in it. The owner reacts with shock and tries to deny the accusation, but Z calls him out, asking if he's enjoying this charade. Suddenly, Z launches the meat across the room, startling the owner. Meat splatters on the floor. The owner panics, realizing Z didn't eat it. He had thrown it away. He wonders how they detected the poison, thinking it shouldn't have been possible. Z then accuses the man directly, saying he had only planned to visit occasionally considering the situation, but now he sees the man as truly despicable for poisoning the meat. The owner tries to cover up his panic and claims there's no poison, yelling that they have no proof. Z calmly replies that he does have evidence. As he opens his eyes, they glow a piercing red. He tells the stunned room, "This is the evidence." The sight of his red eyes stuns the onlookers, and the owner mutters in disbelief. He recognizes it instantly as the red eyes of Arahan. Z, in a cold and intimidating tone, demands to know how the steakhouse owner dared to deceive an Arahan, warning that such a crime warrants a death sentence. The terrified owner stumbles back, trembling, as Z calmly adds that someone like him could disappear without a trace, and no one would care. Panic overtakes the man as he internally screams that he's going to die. Dropping to his knees, the steakhouse owner cries out in apology, saying he didn't recognize such a great figure and and begs for forgiveness. He pleads for mercy, groveling at Z's feet, while inner narration reveals his inability to even question why an Arahan like Z would come to a small southern village, hide his identity, or act like a beggar. The man, completely paralyzed by fear, continues to sob, calling himself foolish and unworthy, promising to do anything if forgiven. As Z watches the grown man break down like a child, he reflects on how overwhelming the authority of an Arahan truly is, and thinks to himself that he should use that kind of intimidation more often. When Z confirms that the man will do anything, he says he'll show mercy just this once due to the owner's sincerity. The man thanks him profusely, saying he'll never forget this kindness. Z lays down his conditions. First, the man must never reveal his identity to anyone. The owner agrees instantly, saying he won't utter a word, not even in the afterlife. Second, Z demands half of the man's wealth and says he'll pretend none of this ever happened. The owner, visibly relieved, agrees immediately and rushes off to fetch the money, thinking he has to move fast before Z changes his mind. As he leaves, Z and Leo exchange a look. Z remarks that the man didn't even dare to speak, a fitting reaction to the presence of an Arahan. Leo then suggests they leave the city as soon as they get the money, and Z agrees. But just as they begin to relax, a familiar voice interrupts them, asking where they're headed in such a hurry. Z and Leo turn, surprised, to find Herna approaching with a knowing smirk. Z and Lu are surprised when Herna reappears, strutting confidently into the room with her usual dramatic flair. Z recognizes her instantly and says her name, catching the attention of the flamboyant woman. Herna greets them playfully, teasing that they meet again, then adds that Z turned out to be quite the impressive figure after all. Z quietly wonders if she somehow knows that he's an Arahan, briefly suspecting that Jank might have exposed him, but he quickly dismisses the idea, thinking the man had been far too terrified to say anything. As Z considers the possibility that Herna might have found out about him from another source, he starts to think it might be time to relocate in case his secret spreads. If people found out he was just an empty shell of an Arahan, not only would his reputation take a hit, but he might also lose the money he had earned from Jank. Herna then requests to speak privately, and Z agrees. Once seated, Z directly asks why she's here and if she has business with him. Herna responds that he's misunderstood. She isn't here only for him, but rather to meet her client. That immediately catches Lu off guard, and he questions her, realizing she must be talking about him. Lu admits to Z that he hired Herna for something and wasn't trying to hide it. Herna explains that she looked into Lu's request but would need more money to continue. Lu becomes flustered and accuses her of going against their original agreement, pointing out how much money he's already given her. Herna coldly replies that what he paid so far wasn't even enough for her meals, and says finding Lu's missing brother, who might not even be alive, is no easy task. Shocked and betrayed, Lu asks how she could do this, revealing that this job was his last hope. Z watches the exchange and says he now understands the situation. He then suggests they come to an agreement. Since Herna said she had business with him too, he proposes they tie both matters together. If she helps Lu, she'll also gain his cooperation. Herna, intrigued, agrees and says her request is simple. She wants Z to fight Ikas again. Lu immediately protests, warning Z that it's obviously a trap. But Z calmly accepts the rematch. Herna, with a sly smile, says she'll keep her promise. Later, as they walk through the dim alleys of the city, Lu is carrying a chest full of gold. Despite their success, he looks downcast. Z asks him why he looks gloomy since they just made a lot of money. Lu apologizes, saying he didn't mean to deceive Z, and that he only contacted Herna because he was desperate. Z says he already knew about the money and the request made behind his back. Lu is surprised, asking why Z pretended not to know. Z replies that he didn't mind because he believed Lu's actions came from genuine need. Lu, eyes wide and emotional, says that he thought Z's help was worth that much. Z then warns him not to hide things anymore, insisting that trust should never be repaid with betrayal. As Lu clutches the gold chest, Z tells him not to be trash, no matter where he came from. Lu, holding back tears, promises to remember that. Lu hesitantly stops Z, pleading with him not to go. Lu suggests they take the money and escape while they still can, following the plan they discussed earlier. Z, however, calmly brings up Lu's brother and asks what they're going to do about his request. Z reminds him that Herna can't be trusted, that she's going to betray them again, and Lu knows it. Despite that, Z knows Lu isn't naive enough to fall for someone like Herna, but the fact that he still went to her shows just how desperate he really is. Z reflects reflects on how desperation led Lu to grab onto a rotten rope even though he knew it was broken, and Herna was the adult who took advantage of that desperation and betrayed him. Lu admits that he had initially intended to flee as well, but says he's changed his mind. Z questions him, surprised by the decision. Lu warns Z that Herna will be fully prepared this time, but Z says that's exactly why he wants to go through with the rematch. When Lu asks why, Z simply tells him when he sees trash, he feels compelled to clean it up. Z then explains that defeating an opponent who gives it their all, even if they're fully prepared, is exhilarating. Something that brings him genuine thrill and satisfaction. Meanwhile, back at Carrion Prison, events are starting to unfold, suggesting that something important is happening behind the scenes. Guards are seen rushing somewhere with urgency. The prison director is informed that all personnel have been assembled. He orders the frontline team to mobilize immediately. The director clenches his hand, surrounded by a dark, ominous aura. He refers to Zed and his group as rat bastards who had been hiding right under their noses. Now filled with rage and determination, the director vows to end them for good this time. His aura intensifies, his body emanating dangerous energy. With a furious expression, he shouts Zed's name, revealing that Z has now become a clear and personal target for him. Comment now if you want more. 3 days later, the giant fighter is still laughing and full of energy, despite Jed having beaten him up so badly. Yet, he can still make that kind of face. It's almost as if he has something up his sleeve. Leo warns Zed that if he ever feels in danger, he must stop immediately. The audience is fired up for the second rematch between the giant and Jed. As the match begins, everyone wonders what Isaac is planning. Leo quickly realizes that Isaac is copying Jed's technique. The giant showed up because of what Herna told him, an Arahan without mana. That shouldn't even be possible. But if that's true, Isaac thinks he has a real chance to win. From his point of view, it also seems true that Jed was abandoned at the camp. As Isaac charges forward to attack, he wants to confirm it for himself. Just like he learned, he throws a punch straight from the chest to his opponent's face. He keeps trying to hit Jed, thinking it'll surprise him, not just because he can do it too, but to prove that others can pull it off as well. After practicing, he found the technique quite useful. Jed admits he's a little surprised, but when he spots a clean opening, he strikes back. That's when Isaac finally realizes the truth. Jed really is a knockoff Arahan without mana. The audience assumes Isaac's tactics have improved, which isn't surprising since he's known as the strongest in the arena. However, Jed is still focused on that ogre's belt, an item that offsets 90% of physical damage. For someone like Zed, whose mana stat is 0, it's actually a terrible item. That's why Isaac seems so confident. Leo grows increasingly worried, wondering why Jed's attack had no effect. He suspects that woman, Herna, must have done something to interfere, making this match dangerous. But Jed simply asks Leo to calm down and watch quietly. The way Jed smiles catches Leo off guard. As the next round begins, Isaac taunts Jed, asking if he's ready to give up. Jed replies instantly with a firm no. Jed admits that Isaac did catch him off guard, but honestly, this is the moment he's been waiting for a very long time. Just for even thinking he'd give up, Jed surprises him by unleashing some incredible skills, this time using his kicks. Finally able to use his leg again, the strongest man on Earth, Kim is truly happy. No one had lasted even a minute against him before, so he never had the chance to use the techniques he'd mastered. But the guy in front of him now is still standing, even after being hit with all kinds of kicks. Naturally, Jed is excited. There's a first time for everything, even for someone like him, also known as Kim. As he continues unleashing different types of kicks relentlessly, Isaac begins to worry. The attacks are too unpredictable. He can't defend against them. It's unbelievable that Jed is supposed to be a magician, but Jed doesn't want him collapsing just yet. He even hopes the kicks aren't hurting Isaac too much. However, after a few more, Isaac can't take it anymore. He gives up. Leo watches in disbelief. Meanwhile, Jed is still thrilled and eager to keep going. The ogre's belt finally breaks, making Isaac panic. Jed, now serious, tells him to stand up, but Isaac starts crying, admitting defeat and pointing out he doesn't even have the belt anymore. He asks the referee to end the match, only to be silenced mid-sentence by yet another kick to the face. For Jed, that still isn't enough. Feels like a waste to end it like this. Suddenly, Isaac sees the true power of an Arahan in Jed's eyes and finally passes out. Yet, something strange is happening. A powerful aura continues burning inside Jed. He wonders what this unfamiliar sensation is. It feels like an earthworm is crawling inside his body. Suddenly, a system panel appears. As Jed looks at it, his eyes widen. Finally, his mana stat has increased from 0 to 1. He feels energy surging through his body. It's even better than he imagined. This is exactly how things are supposed to be. A magician must definitely be able to control mana. Then, he notices something strange. It's been unusually quiet for a while. Just then, Leo comes running in and asks why Jed took out his contacts. But Jed is confused. He didn't remove them. He quickly asks if his eyes aren't blue anymore. Leo confirms that's exactly why he came to find him. Jed hadn't noticed when the lenses came off. Perhaps they melted due to the sudden surge of mana. Leo brings up something else. He says that maybe it's because he hasn't seen Jed's real eyes in a long time, but for some reason, their color now appears darker and brighter than before. Meanwhile, the entire audience is stunned after witnessing Jed's red eyes. They all shout that he's an Arahan. For them, those red eyes are undeniable proof. Panic spreads instantly. Everyone begins fleeing, terrified that just looking into his eyes might kill them. They simply want to get out of his path as fast as possible. Jed realizes they're in serious trouble. The guards will likely show up any minute. He tells Leo to run with him, but Leo is spiraling. He can't keep his emotions in check. He's losing it because this is exactly why he warned Jed earlier that they should run away. As for the woman involved, Jed says he'll deal with her later. For now, he wants her to focus on finding Leo's younger sibling. However, the woman is furious. She now regrets not listening to the warden from the beginning. But now that things haven't gone her way, she's out for blood. She vows that she'll tear Jed Arahan to pieces. The woman reflects on just how much she has lost. Isaac was a top-class player brought in from a major city for a hefty sum. The contract fee alone was 600 gold coins for 3 years. But because of this incident, all that money is now completely wasted. On top of that, the ogre's belt cost another 200 gold coins, and 1,200 gold coins were paid to the carry-on camp director, bringing the total loss to a staggering 2,000 gold coins. It's incredibly frustrating for her. Meanwhile, Jed quickly grabs his money and contact lenses and escapes. Since the village is already swarming with guards, he and Leo decide to hide for a while. After some time passes without any commotion, they cautiously climb out of the barrels to check if the coast is clear. Seeing that it's quiet, Leo suggests that Jed wait while he goes to borrow a carriage. Soon, a man with a carriage appears and says that Lady Herna sent him. She apparently has some information to share, and he's there to take both of them to her. He also mentions that it would be nearly impossible to find another carriage at this time. With no better option, they reluctantly decide to go with him. Inside the carriage, Leo begins to doubt their decision and asks Jed if this is really a good idea. Jed calmly says it's obviously a trap. They're likely being taken to a secluded place to be cornered. Leo is completely baffled and asks why they boarded it if Jed already knew it was a trap. Jed explains that this is a problem they were going to have to face eventually, and escaping right now would have been difficult anyway, so he decided to just go with the flow. Leo starts to feel like this might be the end for him. As expected, once they step out of the carriage, they are immediately surrounded by guards. Lady Herna is already there, smirking. The jailer demands to know how they managed to escape. Leo glances at Jed, hoping he has a plan. The jailer accuses them of trying to steal his key and calls Jed a magician rat. Meanwhile, Lady Herna laughs maniacally from the background, like a hyena enjoying the chaos. She says she actually feels bad for Jed. She reminds them that if only they had joined hands with her, things wouldn't have ended up like this. But Jed has no intention of teaming up with a fox, not in a million years. He refuses to die obediently. Suddenly, the jailer screams that this is the day Jed will meet his end. He warns everyone to stay back. Jed also tells Leo to stay behind. The jailer wasn't expecting Jed to be so eager to fight in this situation. He calls him brave for a magician, but Jed calculates his odds. He believes there's a 50-50 chance of victory. That's good enough for him. It's his mindset, a personal spell that keeps him from being intimidated, even when facing someone as powerful as a 5th Circle Knight. If the odds are still even, then there's no reason for fear. The jailer draws his sword, calling Jed arrogant to the very end. He plans to go all out from the start, channeling his full aura and enveloping his body in power. Jed, however, relies on his ever-trusty fists. As the jailer charges, eyes locked on his target, Jed thinks this isn't bad. This is what he wanted. He doesn't have grand ambitions. He just wants to relive that thrill, to become a challenger once again. Suddenly, the system notifies, Challenger of Strong will activate it. All his stats are temporarily boosted by +10. Once again, his lenses begin to melt, revealing Jed's true nature. A massive surge of aura follows, creating shockwaves and chaos in the area. Leo watches nervously, deeply worried for Jed. As the dust settles, the jailer is still standing, but he looks confused. There's now a huge crater in the ground beneath him. Suddenly, bright sparks begin to appear in the air. Everyone stares at the glowing light, wondering, could this be thunder? Jed has finally fully transformed. He now resembles a legendary Super Saiyan. The system labels this state as electrification. The jailer is stunned and demands to know how Jed achieved this. He didn't expect the battle to flip so dramatically, but before he can even process it, Jed charges straight at him, leading with a powerful kick. The jailer manages to block it with his sword, but the confidence he had earlier is now gone. The force before him is overwhelming. He can't believe what he's seeing. This is thunder, a unique power that ignores all four elemental forces: water, wind, earth, and fire. It's the power every magician dreams of, the one even the legendary first head of the Arahan family failed to master. So how could someone like Jed, who was believed to be a talentless fool, awaken such a force? The other guards are equally stunned, their faces filled with fear. Even Lady Anna is overcome with frustration. This endless chain of losses seems to have no end for her. No one moves. Everyone is frozen in awe. Leo watches in amazement and wonders if this is truly the power of the Arahan bloodline. Then the battle picks up again. The jailer snarls that people who rely on their bloodline and throw their weight around like Jed is doing now are the type he despises most. So even if it's futile, he decides to fight back. He sends a slashing beam toward Jed, but Jed, now incredibly fast, dodges it with ease again and again. The jailer then tries a more creative beam attack, claiming that Jed won't be able to avoid this one. But Jed doesn't even need to dodge. He activates his electric shield, neutralizing the attack completely. In a flash, Jed knocks the jailer's sword away and delivers a thunderous electric punch straight to his gut. The jailer's body convulses from the shock. Jed takes satisfaction in hearing the agonized screams of the once arrogant monster. The entire area is engulfed in a storm of aura and electricity clashing violently. No matter how much aura the jailer unleashes, it's nothing compared to what Jed can do now. Still, the jailer is puzzled. Why is this man, who is supposed to be a wizard, relying so heavily on physical attacks like punches and kicks? And why is he so skilled at fighting? Typically, wizards cast spells to immobilize knights, while knights push through the magic to close the distance. That's how battles have always worked in this world. But in this fight, those tactics are completely useless. Jed is not only casting magic, he's using his fists just as effectively. Realizing the situation is unlike anything he's faced before, the jailer begins thinking of a new approach. He tries to create distance to gain room to swing his sword, but Jed closes the gap in an instant, striking him hard in the face with blinding speed. There's no opening, he can do nothing but take the hits. Sometimes it's to the face, sometimes to the stomach. His entire body is racked with pain. A single punch from Jed sends him flying. The surrounding guards, alarmed, ask if the director is all right and whether he needs assistance. But the jailer yells at them to stay back. This is his battle, and he still has his pride. As expected, he admits that the Arahan bloodline is truly incredible. He accepts defeat and braces himself for the end. Jed then offers to tell him the reason he lost. The jailer, however, isn't interested. He just wants it to be over. Still, Jed says it anyway. The only reason the jailer lost was because Jed trained harder and put in more effort. Hearing that, the jailer bursts into laughter. Training and effort? That's nonsense to him. In his eyes, Jed only won because he was born as an Arahan. They were simply born different, and that, he believes, is the real reason he lost. The jailer doesn't expect someone like Zed to understand the joys and sorrows of ordinary people like him. He reveals that his entire life was ruined because of people like Zed, nobles blessed with power and privilege. Zed doesn't respond immediately. He simply stands there, his body radiating with crackling lightning aura. After a brief silence, Zed admits that, at this very moment, he is actually weaker than the jailer. If the jailer had gained a bit more experience and played his cards right, Zed says he would have lost. He tells the jailer that his defeat lies not in fate or bloodline, but in himself. His sense of entitlement became his ceiling. It stopped him from growing. Zed urges him not to search for external excuses for his failure. Hearing this, the jailer chuckles. He admits that he had forgotten the true spirit of a knight and never expected to be reminded of it by a young wizard. But now he understands. Still, he says he's had enough of talking, he just wants Zed to finish it. This puts Zed in a tough spot. If he defeats someone like the jailer here, the Empire will certainly place a bounty on him. But he also can't just let him walk away. Suddenly, the system notifies that the skill electrification has been disbanded. As the electric aura dissipates, Zed wonders if this marks the end of the encounter. Just then, Anna begins screaming at the guards, furious that they're still standing around. She orders them to seize the Arahan now. As the guards close in from all directions, options, even Zed has to admit it's going to be troublesome fighting this many opponents alone. But then, something strange begins to happen. A sudden gust of wind sweeps across the area. The guards look around in confusion, wondering where this wind came from. Zed instantly recognizes it as magic. Someone nearby is casting a spell. But that doesn't make things any easier for him. In fact, it's worse because now he can't see his opponent. He realizes he'll need to figure out an escape plan quickly. Fortunately, after a while, the violent storm begins to ease up. But when Zed looks around, he's shocked to find that all the guards are already taken down. Even that woman, Anna, is unconscious. He can't understand how all of this happened without a single sound. Zed starts wondering if a wizard actually helped him, but he isn't sure. He knows he has to handle this situation carefully or things could go very wrong. Quickly, he scans the area and calls out for Leo, hoping he's still alive. For a few tense moments, there's no response, but then Leo finally replies. Seeing that he's safe, Zed feels a wave of relief. Leo asks if Zed was the one who did all this, but Zed says no. He suspects that a high-ranking wizard must be nearby and urges that they leave immediately. But before they go, Leo tells him to wait and shows him a strange card he found lying on the ground. It's spotless and looks like it was dropped recently. Something about it feels off. Meanwhile, from the shadows of a tree, a masked figure watches them silently, his focus entirely on the two. After traveling some distance, Zed and Leo stop and light a campfire. Zed examines the blank card again. When he spills a little mana on it, a hidden pattern is revealed. It's a magic card bearing the mark of the Black Flame, the symbol of the Arahan family. This isn't just any card. It belongs to the Arahan's Black Army, the largest secret organization in the Empire. They follow only the head of the Arahan family, and their numbers, purpose, and operations are kept completely hidden. Zed notices the number 4 on the card. If he remembers correctly, 1 stands for acceptance, 2 for rejection, 3 for deal or proposal, and 4 means monitoring or protection. That means the Arahan family might be protecting him. But if they had thrown him away before because he had no magic power, why would they protect him now? Suddenly, the answer clicks. It must be because of his magic stat. The skill is deactivated now, which likely means his magic stat is still too low. Zed guesses he might need a mana stat of 5 or maybe even 10 to activate it. He just hopes it's only 5. Meanwhile, Leo is also unable to sleep and asks Zed what they should do next. Zed replies that they don't have many options other than heading to Frilda, the place where Leo last saw his younger sibling. However, Leo reminds him of what Zed said earlier, that the coachman's body was missing. The rumors must have spread by now, and the Empire will probably issue a wanted notice soon. They can't go to Frilda without a carriage. It's just too far to travel on foot. But Zed already anticipated this and has adjusted their route. Instead, their next destination will be Tamaya. At the southern front outpost of Tamaya village, a large magic circle activates, and a man steps out alongside his horse. He isn't alone. Several people are with him, and they begin discussing their search immediately. This man, named Taurus Bahal, is determined to find the Arahan and execute him. Before beginning his search, this knight in shining armor, Taurus, first visited his lord, who had summoned him. The lord entrusted him with a mission, explaining that a few years ago, Arahan had been imprisoned at the Carrion Detention Center. Just a few days ago, however, he escaped the facility and is now on the run after killing the warden and several others in Mota City. The lord places complete trust in Taurus, giving him the freedom to make his own decisions while upholding the honor of their family. Taurus solemnly promises to stake his life on carrying out this command. The next day, Leo still isn't sure about Zed's plan. He thinks it's completely insane. Zed, however, replies that Leo has been saying the same thing for 5 days now, and he'd really appreciate it if he would stop. But Leo keeps shouting and complaining, saying they must be the only fools walking into the front lines on their own. At the Empire's outskirts lies the front line used to defend against beasts. Each noble house is responsible for a designated region, and the southern region belongs to the Bahal family. The village they're heading to, Tamaya, is located at the very edge of this front line, where beasts occasionally appear. The only reason they're risking a trip to this forward base is because it has a transport gate. However, the gate is so expensive that even most nobles can't afford to use it. Luckily, they have enough money. Since Zed refuses to change the plan, Leo mutters that Zed will only realize this is madness after getting ripped apart by a beast. But Zed laughs, saying Leo must know deep down that this is their best and only option. Later that night, they set up camp for dinner. Leo suggests they eat well, since they never know when their end might come. Suddenly, Zed feels a strange vibration in the air. He quickly warns Leo that something is approaching. This terrifies Leo. Just when they thought they were finally having a calm moment, trouble strikes again. However, Leo wonders if it really is a beast. Jed says he would actually prefer that. But whatever it is, it's not alone. He can feel vibrations from at least a dozen sources. For now, he doesn't believe the Bahal family would allow that many beasts to slip through the southern front undetected. After a short while, they see a large group of people approaching on horseback. Spotting a white horse with striking blue eyes confirms their suspicions. It's the Bahal Knights, and there are at least 50 of them. Jed hopes they'll just ride past, but then the Knights spot traces of their campsite. This is bad news for both Jed and Leo. The Bahal Knight Order only accepts members of 5th Circle or above. In other words, these are 50 high-level warriors. Hiding won't work for long. They'll be found eventually. Running doesn't seem like a good option either, considering the Knights are mounted. Leo suggests that Jed should try to escape on his own. Maybe he has a chance. Jed is confused, but Leo insists that the Knights will definitely kill Jed, while he might be spared. He tells Jed not to worry about him, because at least he won't be executed. But Jed can clearly see that even though Leo is trying to act brave, he's trembling all over. Jed calmly tells Leo not to worry. Leaving a comrade behind isn't something he can do. Meanwhile, the Bahal Knights are still searching the area. Their leader scolds them, demanding to know why it's taking so long to find just 2 people. Suddenly, out of the shadows, Jed Arahan steps forward. He recalls that the number 4 from the magic card meant either monitoring or protection, and he wants to see how this plays out. Standing still means death, so he might as well act. Jed asks to speak with their commander, but the Knights don't wait. One of them attacks immediately, faster than Jed anticipated. Another knight appears behind him, swinging his sword. As Jed looks back, a magical circle suddenly appears beneath him, and as the sword strikes, a magical shield activates to block the blow. Jed himself has no idea why the attack was blocked, and the knight who struck him is equally shocked. Suddenly, a voice commands all the knights to stand down. The Bahal Knights quickly regroup and demand to know who is speaking. Jed is also taken aback. He had suspected someone might be watching from a distance, but he didn't expect them to be this close. Even with his perception stat maxed at 100, he didn't sense anything. That alone proves how immeasurable the power of Arahan's Black Army truly is. Once again, the mysterious voice urges the knights to retreat, assuring them that nothing will happen if they do. But Taurus Bahal, not one to back down easily, raises his sword, which now glows with blue magic, and demands to know who dares block their path. The other knights are stunned by their leader's boldness. The Black Army identifies the presence of Bahal's executor, Taurus. Even Jed feels an uncanny sense of familiarity. Taurus was the character he played the longest, the one who stood by his side until the very end. Although now isn't the time for sentiment, seeing him in person is thrilling. Jed finds himself barely restraining the urge to start fangirling. Bahal looks directly at Jed and says, "You must be Zed Arahan." But the Black Army Knight standing in front of Jed calmly tells Bahal to stand aside. If he turns back now, he promises nothing will happen. Jed now feels certain that this knight is trying to protect him, but why would the Black Army go to such lengths? Bahal begins to piece things together. These people must be the rumored secret organization of the Arahan family. Even so, he can't believe that, knowing who he is, they would dare to interfere like this. Furious, Bahal declares that Arahan has finally crossed the line. He raises his hand and announces that they will all pay for touching Bahal with their lives. But the Black Army Knights disagree. Suddenly, a massive magic circle forms beneath the Bahal Knights. They're completely taken by surprise. Jed quickly realizes that the magic circle is a type of trap. Jed realizes he can either step on the magic circle or avoid it, but the enemy predicted his exact movements and set it up in advance. That level of foresight is something he has to admire. This isn't the work of a 5th or even 6th circle mage. The precision and skill suggest that this is the work of a 7th circle mage. The Black Knight declares that if the Bahal Knights make a move, the circle will explode. The Knights freeze in place, but Taurus remains defiant. He asks whether Arahan truly seeks war with Bahal. Once again, the Black Knight calmly repeats his warning. Turn back now, because even Lord Bahal himself would want that outcome. Taurus is infuriated. He can't believe these Black Knights dare to insult the Bahal family. A powerful aura flares up around him as he prepares his sword for a strike. Jed grows uneasy. If this is still the early stage of the game, then Taurus is, at best, at the 6th circle level. If a full-scale battle breaks out here, Taurus and his knights will be completely annihilated. Yet Taurus shows no signs of retreating. His aura takes the form of a roaring lion. Jed instantly recognizes it as Bahal's first secret technique, Lion's Roar. But Jed doesn't want this to escalate. Taurus isn't strong enough yet. He needs to be at least 7th circle to properly wield that technique. Jed just wants him to back down or he'll get himself killed. Seeing that Taurus is unwilling to retreat, Jed pleads pleads with the Black Knight to disable the magic circle. At first, the knight ignores him, but Jed shouts again, demanding it be deactivated. The Black Knight replies that it's not possible. They only follow the former Lord Arahan's commands. His orders were to protect Jed, not to obey him. If that's the case, Jed asks, why is he trying to kill Bahal's executor? He argues that it's unnecessary. At the mage's current level, he could easily carry out the mission without resorting to killing Taurus. The Black Knight remains silent, offering no response. Jed insists again, demanding that he disable the magic circle immediately. At the same time, he shouts at Taurus to stop this madness. But Taurus refuses to listen to anything from an Arahan. He snaps at Jed to shut up. Taurus reminds him that he took down the warden and innocent citizens of the South, and there's no way he can let someone like that walk free. He wants to ensure that Jed pays for his crimes. Jed tries to reason with him, explaining that it's all just a misunderstanding, that if they could simply talk things through, it would become clear. Taurus responds with a cold fine, but then suddenly yells out that he'll make Jed kneel first, then they can talk. Without hesitation, he charges straight at Jed, unleashing his lion's roar. Since Taurus didn't trigger the explosion even after moving, it must mean the Black Knight has deactivated the magic circle. However, Taurus shows no restraint. His powerful aura bursts out in all directions, pressing against the Black Knights and even reaching Leo, who is growing increasingly worried for Jed. Thankfully, as the dust settles, a shield is revealed to have protected Jed. Even he admits that if it weren't for the Black Army's intervention, he would have been killed. Still, Taurus managed to break through a 7th Circle Mage's quadruple wind barrier. His power may be incomplete, but it's already at an overwhelming level. That strike had a lot of effort and force behind it. Suddenly, Taurus collapses to his knees, unable to remain standing. The recoil from using an unfinished secret technique so recklessly has taken its toll. Witnessing the lion's roar in person was incredible, but Jed doesn't want his hero to destroy himself. He asks if Taurus is feeling better and points out that he hasn't mastered the technique yet, so why use it in such a reckless way? Taurus, struggling, asks how Jed knows about his family's secret technique, but before he can get an answer, he loses consciousness and falls to the ground. His knights immediately rush to him in panic, calling out to their lord. Jed tells them it's mana backlash and warns that if they don't treat him immediately, it will be too late. The knights begin preparing healing magic, pleading with Taurus to hang in there, but Jed sees the problem clearly. They can't treat mana backlash when their magic circle is lower than the patient's. If only someone with a higher circle was here, and there is, standing right behind him. Jed turns to the Black Knight and tries to reason with him, asking him to treat Taurus himself. But this request frustrates the knight. He can't believe Jed is seriously asking him to save a knight. Jed insists, saying that Taurus is an old friend of his. But for the Black Army Knight, it's still ridiculous. A knight is an enemy, he says, never a friend. Jed tries to make the Black Army Knight understand that saving Taurus isn't about emotion, it's about prioritizing benefit. If Taurus dies here, Arahan won't be able to avoid an all-out war with the Bahal family, and that would do them no good. But for the Black Army Knight, Taurus's death might actually be advantageous for Arahan. Besides, he argues, this situation was caused by Taurus himself, and it has nothing to do with their mission. Jed realizes they're wasting time they don't have, so he makes it clear, since the Black Army Knight is the one who caused this escalation, it's now tied to his mission to protect Jed. Jed picks up a sword and says that if Taurus isn't saved now, the knight's mission ends right here too. To prove his point, Jed even injures himself slightly, just enough to show that he's always stood by his word. If the Black Army has been observing him, they should know Jed never bluffs. Frustrated, the Black Army Knight warns that if the Lord finds out about this, he'll be furious. Jed replies that any consequences will be his burden to bear. Right now, the only thing that matters is saving Taurus. With no choice left, the Black Army Knight starts walking toward Taurus. However, the Bahal Knights immediately protest, demanding he stop. They can't allow a mage to lay a hand on their beloved commander. Jed urges them to step aside, telling them that this mage is the only one who can save Taurus. Unless they want their master to die, they should let him proceed. Reluctantly, the Bahal Knights step back, and the Black Army Knight begins the healing spell. As the magic works, they all breathe a sigh of relief. Taurus's mana circuits are stabilizing. Once the healing is done, the Black Army Knight vanishes into thin air. Jed has no idea where he went, but he suspects he's still nearby. Leo asks him what's wrong, but Jed doesn't answer. He's just spotted another one of those magic cards. Later, on the outskirts of Tamaya village, Jed and Leo stand alongside the Bahal Knights and their horses. Jed examines a new magic card. This time it's marked with the number 9, which signifies abandonment or survival. Leo also realizes that the Black Army mages must have been the ones who left the last card as well. Jed agrees, saying that the message is clear: they're being told to handle things on their own now. This makes sense to Leo, as Arahan is probably furious after losing their biggest support. Curious, Jed asks how Leo knows about the Black Army. Leo says they're simply too well known. Even toddlers know the name. They might not know exactly what the organization does, but the reputation alone is legendary. Either way, Leo insists they need to lay low for now. Just one look at the knights on high alert is enough to know that any wrong move could get them killed. But Jed points out that if the roles were reversed, if they were mages and he were a knight, he would have already been dead. Leo doesn't get it at first, so Jed explains, knights value honor above all. Even if you're a wanted criminal, killing someone who saved your life would be disgraceful. Knights die for honor, while mages are willing to kill their friends if it brings them gain. In Jed's view, both extremes are irrational but easier to manage. With knights, you appeal to honor. With mages, you just offer them a bigger benefit. Just then, a knight approaches and informs them that Lord Taurus wishes to see them. Jed and Leo are escorted and offered tea, which Taurus explains is called Minar tea, cultivated by the Bahal family itself. The aroma is exquisite. Both of them try it and are pleasantly surprised. It's fragrant and soothing. Taurus then asks how they're feeling. Jed replies that he's feeling much better, thanks to the generous hospitality they've received. They quietly sip their tea for a moment, enjoying the calm. Finally, Jed breaks the silence by saying he doesn't like stiff atmospheres and would prefer to drop the formal act. He notes that Taurus is turning 17 this year and suggests they keep things relaxed and speak informally. Taurus simply stares at Jed for a moment before asking how old he is. Jed replies that he's about 15, which makes Taurus roughly 2 years older. Jed jokes, wondering if Taurus expects him to call him Big Bro. Taurus, however, says he has no interest in having a mage call him that. It's not something he's comfortable with. Jed is fine with that too. He had no intention of doing it anyway. Leo, still enjoying his tea, can't help but notice how casually Arahan and Bahal are now talking, almost like friends. Before getting to the main point, Taurus begins by expressing his gratitude, saying he owes them his life. Jed is a bit surprised to hear someone from Bahal thanking a mage. It's rare to see such humility from a noble of his status, but Jed already knew Taurus was different, and he liked that about him. Taurus says enough small talk. It's time to get to the point. Since Jed claimed that the murder of Commander Clark was a misunderstanding, Taurus now wants to hear exactly what he meant by that. Jed agrees to explain everything, and not just what Taurus asked, but more. He recounts everything that happened from the detention camp to the present moment, though he leaves out certain details like unlocking his mana or gaining lightning energy. After finishing his account, Jed reminds Taurus of the Arahan nature, how they never backed down from a fight. They were the ones who attacked first, so he had to defend himself. Taurus listens carefully and admits that if everything Jed said is true, then it could very well fall under self-defense. The real issue now is whether or not Jed is telling the truth. However, Jed points out that if he had no intention of clearing things up, he would have simply let Taurus die earlier. From his perspective, there's no better proof of his sincerity than that. Even Taurus has to admit that it's a fair point. He finally believes Jed and confesses that he had been mistaken. As an apology for the misunderstanding, he offers Jed a gift, powdered minar leaves. But Jed declines the gift. Instead, he says that if Taurus truly wants to apologize, then he should grant him a favor. Taurus replies that as long as the request is within his authority, he'll definitely do it, so he asks Jed what it is. Jed explains that it should be within Taurus's power. All he wants is help in finding Leo's missing sibling. Leo is surprised, but Taurus is confused. From his perspective, Jed gains nothing from this, and it certainly doesn't align with typical mage behavior. But Jed brushes that off. He made a promise to Leo, and that's all that matters to him. The next morning, while Jed is working out, Leo reflects on how unusual it was that Jed used Bahal's goodwill just to ask for help finding some street rat's lost sibling. It's strange. Jed is a really strange guy. But still, Leo is happy and wants to do whatever he can to help. He asks Jed if he's hungry, saying he'll even go out and look for that special Bertisan variety of meat. Jed says he'll join him soon. He just wants to finish one last set. Meanwhile, Taurus is observing both of them from a distance. He's puzzled by Jed's behavior, wondering why a mage, who are typically said to view sweating as barbaric, is working out so intensely. He's also heard the rumors that Zed Arahan has no mana. For a mage, lacking mana is like a knight being unable to wield a sword. Yet Jed refuses to give up. He keeps pushing forward with everything he's got. It's such an honorable sight that even Taurus admits, if he were in Jed's position, he wouldn't have been able to act with the same integrity. After this, Taurus made up his mind to befriend the mage who was more knightly than any knight he had ever known. To show his appreciation, Taurus also brings out the rare Bertisan meat. Leo can't believe they actually prepared something this valuable for them. Taurus explains that they're doing their best, After all, they are hosting an Arahan. The other knights clearly don't seem thrilled about this, but none of them dares to voice their discomfort in front of Taurus. Taurus further adds that the meat is high in protein, making it great for physical training, which surprises Leo. Then, Taurus tells everyone to settle down, reminding them that it's not good to waste time when there's food in front of them. Seeing the round table without a head seat makes Jed appreciate Taurus even more. He's really starting to like him. However, Leo still feels uneasy. He wonders if it's really safe to eat this. What if it's poisoned? He glances at Jed for reassurance. Jed tells him it's fine, and that they can trust the food. It tastes far better than anything they had in the camp. Once Leo takes a bite, he agrees. The way the meat melts in the mouth is incredible. Taurus asks if they really liked it. Jed says it's amazing and jokes that if Taurus eats this kind of food every day, he's honestly jealous. But Jed also understands that nothing in this world comes free. Serving something this expensive must mean they want something in return. Kindness has its limits, after all. One of the knights finally can't take it anymore. He apologizes and says he's feeling too uncomfortable, deciding to leave. Once one leaves, the others soon follow. They can't bear to stay either. They tolerated Jed's presence at the outpost, but this is just too much. All they can do now is apologize and leave. The table is mostly empty now. Only Leo, Jed, and Taurus remain. Taurus apologizes on behalf of the others, but Jed tells him not to worry and adds that if he's considering punishing them, it won't be necessary. Since punishing them wouldn't do any good either, Jed tells Taurus to let it go. Taurus is genuinely surprised that Jed is still defending the knights even after being insulted by them. But Jed explains that those knights have likely hated mages since birth. It's only natural. Scolding them won't help. Instead, they should try to understand and comfort them. Taurus agrees and says he's learned another valuable lesson. More importantly, Jed asks Taurus to finally say what he's been holding back. Taurus is a bit surprised that Jed picked up on it. He reveals that while they initially planned to head to Frilda to search for Leo's younger sibling, they would like to delay their departure by a day. Jed asks why. Taurus explains that he wants the other knights to see for themselves that Jed is a good person, and he thinks one day should be enough for that. Before agreeing, Jed checks with Leo if he's okay with the delay. Leo says it's fine. After all, they'll need the knights' help in Frilda. If they go now without building some trust, the search likely won't be taken seriously anyway. With that, they decide to delay their journey by a day. Later, beyond Tamaya's walls at the southern front, a beast is slashed down by a knight. It was only a low-tier beast, but Taurus still praises the knight's efforts. The group continues their search and pushes forward. Jed is among them, but it's clear the other knights are not happy with his presence. Even Jed wonders why Taurus brought him along. Though he's decided to go along with it for now, the mood isn't ideal. Taurus has assembled a 20-member frontline hunting party, as the southern and western regions are known for stronger beast activity. The hunt operations are intense and challenging. Jed wonders if this is all part of Bahal's tradition. Perhaps Taurus is trying to include him in the spirit of camaraderie that often follows a successful hunt. In Bahal, it's a tradition to hold a celebration after a safe return from research or a hunt. Taurus may be trying to ease Jed into that environment. Just then, one of the knights alerts Taurus that they've found unfamiliar tracks ahead. These tracks are unlike anything the knights are used to seeing. They've never encountered such footprints before. Since none of them can identify the creature, it seems to be an undiscovered beast not listed in the bestiary. According to protocol, they're supposed to report this to headquarters immediately. However, Taurus feels that heading back right away doesn't sit right. This is Area 1, after all, so even if it's an undiscovered beast, it's probably low level. Still, the knights argue that not knowing what they're dealing with makes it dangerous. Even Jed agrees it's safer to retreat if they truly have no idea what the enemy is. But that's only if they don't know. Jed then offers to help. Taurus is curious and asks if Jed actually knows what the creature is. Jed confidently replies that it's a basilisk. He explains that while the beast is only mid-level, Taurus is a 6th Circle Knight and has about 25th Circle Knights with him. They should be able to handle it. Taurus is surprised and asks if Jed is being serious. One of the knights clearly doesn't trust a mage's word and scoffs, saying there's no way someone from Arahan, in the west, would know about a southern beast if they've never encountered it before. Jed asks if they have proof that the basilisk appears only in the south. Maybe Arahan just did better research. The knight snaps back, calling Jed an insolent bastard without mana, and says they won't tolerate an Arahan insulting Bahal. But this time, Jed pushes back. He points out that it's they who are being disrespectful. A mere squad member dares to speak informally to the son of the Arahan family. Seeing the tension escalating, Taurus quickly shouts, "Enough!" and orders everyone to remain silent until he speaks. He then turns to Jed and apologizes on behalf of the knight, though it's clear the others don't like that one bit. Taurus admits that building goodwill is proving more difficult than he expected. But before anyone can respond further, a massive beast suddenly emerges right behind them. Taurus immediately orders everyone to get into battle positions and spread out. He himself barely manages to dodge the beast's initial attack. Glancing at Jed to check if he's safe, Jed quickly shouts for Taurus to dodge again. The monster is right behind him. Taurus evades another bite just in time and then notices even more monsters approaching. Without wasting a second, Taurus unleashes his aura, engulfing his entire sword in energy, and orders everyone to focus their attacks on the beast to the right. Following his lead, the knights ready their swords, and as Taurus charges, they all launch their attacks together. Despite their coordinated assault, nothing seems to work. Their sword auras, even those from trained 5th and 6th Circle Knights, are unable to pierce the creature's tough hide. The beast roars. It's now its turn to strike back. The knights brace themselves, but Jed urgently yells for everyone to get down. Taurus immediately echoes the command, telling the others to follow Jed's instructions. All the knights hit the ground, but one of them standing beside Jed refuses to obey, unwilling to take orders from a mage. Jed yells at him, calling him a fool and ordering him to get down immediately. Just then, the monster lashes out with its tail, releasing a storm of needle-like projectiles across the area. Thanks to Jed's quick thinking and the knights lying low, most of the poisonous needles fly harmlessly past. Jed had even forced the disobedient knight down in time, saving his life. If those needles had hit, they would have caused serious harm. Taurus observes that the needles are coated with poison, but curiously, none of them actually embedded into the ground. Jed warns Taurus that the creature's next attack will likely strike lower, making it harder to dodge. Taurus instantly realizes that they need to finish the fight before that happens. Jed tells him to focus on the beast to the left with his knights. Taurus then asks if Jed plans to take one on by himself or if he knows of any weakness in the creature they can exploit. Jed says they don't have time to waste, so he needs confirmation right now. Can Taurus and his knights handle the beast or not? Taurus immediately understands the urgency and promises that they'll deal with it quickly, but he also tells Jed that he doesn't want him to die. Hearing that makes Jed feel genuinely good. At least now he's certain that Taurus is a really solid guy. Jed nods and tells Taurus that he's counting on him. Taurus turns to his knights and commands them to follow him as they move in to take down the monster on the left. He takes the lead in the charge. Just then, the system notifies Jed that the trait Stubborn Challenger has been activated. Now that his favorite character is fighting with everything he has, Jed can't just sit back. He prepares his fists and gathers his electricity. All his stats are temporarily boosted by 10, and his skill electrification activates, covering his entire body in golden electric aura. With lightning surging around him, he shouts at the monster to come at him, because now he's ready to fight. Without hesitation, Jed charges toward the beast. As soon as Jed reaches striking distance, he smiles. Finding a basilisk right after a monster hunt feels like pure luck. It's the perfect opportunity for him to test his newfound strength against such a formidable creature. He recalls that the basilisk has only one weak point, right at the crown of its head. Without hesitation, Jed aims directly for it and delivers a devastating electric punch. The basilisk goes down in just one hit. Then comes the moment of the drop. Jed clasps his hands and prays for something truly valuable. When he opens his eyes, he's thrilled to see Demon's Breath, a key ingredient for crafting an elixir. If poured into holy water, there's a chance it can become a full elixir. Normally, elixirs randomly boost any stat, but in Jed's case, the only stat that can increase is mana. So, for him, it's essentially a 100% guaranteed mana potion. With one beast defeated, Jed immediately turns to help with the other. Taurus is fighting bravely but struggling, being pushed back repeatedly by the second basilisk. Jed feels like he's falling too far behind the knight's pace. There's no time to waste. He charges in and targets the basilisk's weak spot before it can land another blow on Taurus. Even Taurus is stunned by the incredible power now on display. Jed asks if he's okay, but Taurus is too mesmerized to answer, He can't believe what he just witnessed. The other knights rush over as well, shocked by Jed's sudden appearance and the intense aura around him. They begin to realize it's lightning chi. Taurus immediately asks if that's really lightning chi. Jed casually confirms, saying anyone could recognize it. But this revelation shocks Taurus even further. He thought Jed had no mana. Jed explains that he only recently acquired his mana. Taurus stares at him in disbelief. How could someone simply acquire mana like that? The mana ring that surrounds the heart is usually formed at birth. In some cases, the circuits take a bit longer to connect, but by the age of 6, all circuits must be fully connected. That means for someone like Jed, who's around 15 years old, not having a mana ring until now is like someone born with 9 fingers suddenly growing a 10th. In the Empire's 1,000-year history, something like this has never happened. Taurus concludes that even the heavens must have been moved by Jed's unwavering will. Another demon's breath drops from the second basilisk, and Jed asks Taurus if he can have it. Taurus immediately agrees. Since Jed took down the beast, the loot rightfully belongs to him. However, Jed says that this much is more than enough. Even if he were to sell the basilisk skin, it would fetch the price of a fine feast. Despite playing this game for over 10 years, he's never once received 2 demon's breaths in one go. Today, he truly hit the jackpot. He's so satisfied that he doesn't even feel the need to eat. His joy alone fills him. Meanwhile, news spreads like wildfire across the village. Everyone's talking about Arahan, the mage who joined the Knights' hunt and defeated an undiscovered demon with his bare hands. Word also spreads that he has awakened lightning chi, an energy many believed was nothing more than a legend. While some remain skeptical, questioning how a mage who once had no mana could suddenly wield lightning chi, others confirm they saw it with their own eyes. Even Lord Taurus acknowledged it, so it must be true. What shocks people even more is that Arahan gave up the basilisk's valuable hide. They also hear that he trains and sweats during his breaks, something unheard of for a mage. A mage who rejects wealth, a mage who sweats. To the people, he is no longer just a mage. He's an idol. Many people in town even wish for the chance to talk to that Arahan. Some regret not volunteering for the mission, thinking they missed the opportunity to witness everything in action. One of the knights, previously skeptical, approaches Jed and thanks him for saving his life earlier. Jed simply hopes he wasn't hurt. The knight replies that he's fine, but still can't believe he hesitated on the battlefield. As a knight, that's unacceptable to him, and he vows to reflect deeply and improve himself. Leo, watching all this, wonders just what Jed did out there to cause such a complete turnaround in the knight's opinions. Jed guesses they probably like him now. He even bets they'll genuinely help Leo search for his sibling tomorrow. Suddenly, Taurus calls Jed and Leo aside. He praises Jed for the great job he did, noting how much the knights' attitudes have changed. Everyone who joined the mission has now volunteered to assist with the search in Frilda. Jed knows they must be exhausted, but still, it means a lot, and he expresses his gratitude. Taurus, however, says it's only natural. As knights, they are expected to act even when tired, especially since they now owe Jed a life debt as comrades. Then Taurus mentions that he'll be visiting his family tomorrow. Apparently, the head of the Bahal family was quite shocked to hear about today's events. Jed wonders if Taurus is going to get scolded for getting so close to an Arahan, but Taurus has already made peace with that. He plans to meet the family head and then head straight to Frilda. He also assures Leo that he'll give his all in helping find his younger sibling. He promises they will find her. Jed smiles and tells Leo that the heir of Bahal himself is going to help. Surely, that must feel reassuring. Overwhelmed with emotion, Leo can't hold back his tears and thanks them both from the bottom of his heart. But they tell him he doesn't need to thank them because they're friends. The next day, the group arrives at Frilda, the southern trade hub and port city. Leo reveals that her name is Lisa. She's a girl and is 13 years old this year. She has long blonde hair that goes down to her waist. He also mentions her height, but admits he's not exactly sure since she might have grown since they last saw each other. Jed asks if that's all, and then Leo adds that she's also really cute. Everyone just stares in silence, unsure of how to respond to that. Anyway, Jed then says that this is all the information they have. They don't know exactly where she went, but she's definitely somewhere in Frilda. So, he wants all the knights to begin by searching among the slaves belonging to small and medium-sized families in the city. He hopes they'll be able to investigate to that extent. The knights all affirm that they can. Meanwhile, Jed decides to start with the merchant group where Leo used to work. Leo agrees and says it's not far from here. Jed then asks if there's a clothing shop nearby. Leo wonders why he's suddenly asking about clothes. Soon, they reach a place called the Hamel Trading Firm, Leo's last workplace. Though they had falsely accused him of theft and kicked him out, that means they'll instantly recognize him if he goes in. So, Jed decides to buy some fancy clothes and go in alone. Leo apologizes but understands. He also compliments Jed, saying he really does look like a noble when dressed up. Even though he knows Jed actually is a noble, he couldn't help but make the comment. Inside, at the reception, Jed is instantly welcomed and thanked for visiting. The receptionist politely asks if there's something specific he's looking for. Jed first confirms if this is indeed the Hamel trading firm, while Leo keeps watch from a hidden spot. But to Jed's surprise, the receptionist laughs and says the young master must be mistaken. This place is a slave market. That catches Jed off guard. Suddenly, the receptionist's tone changes. He senses something is off and immediately accuses Jed of not being a noble. He warns Jed not to try pulling tricks like that, saying he doesn't appreciate imposters. Jed keeps up the act, insisting that the receptionist is making a mistake. What if he really is a noble? But the receptionist just laughs again, saying that kind of trick won't work on him. He tells Jed that merchants survive purely on sharp instinct, and to a noble, a slave is nothing more than a product. Real nobles never go around alone. From the moment he saw Jed, he knew something was off. Judging by the prank, he wonders if DeVito sent him. Jed thinks the merchant should reconsider whether he's actually sharp or just plain stupid. This angers the merchant, who raises his hand to teach Jed a lesson. But moments later, it's clear the merchant himself has received quite a few lessons, straight to his face. Jed tells him that if he doesn't want to get hurt even more, he'd better give him answers immediately. To make sure the message is clear, Jed slaps him again. First, since Jed believed this building used to belong to the Hamel trading firm, he demands to know why these people are here now. The merchant immediately responds that the previous owner went bankrupt and their group took over the property. Next, Jed asks who DeVito is and whether he's a slave trader as well. The merchant replies yes. He's the owner of the largest slave market in the southern region. That makes DeVito Jed's next target. Jed then asks one more thing. Where is everyone in this place? The merchant confirms if Jed means products by everyone. Jed slaps him again for using that word. He does not appreciate people being referred to as products. The merchant starts to speak, but still refers to them as products. This triggers Jed into another round of continuous slapping, again and again. But the merchant stubbornly continues to say products, no matter how many times he gets slapped. Jed tells him that slaves are people too, and it's not okay to treat people like objects. At the very least, he expects this merchant to live with a shred of decency. It's not that hard, or at least he hopes so. The merchant promises to keep that in mind from now on. Finally, Jed tells him to show the way. The merchant immediately says he will guide him right away. Then he leads Jed toward a curtain, behind which Jed witnesses a sight that leaves him completely speechless. Seeing people locked up like this only makes Jed even angrier. He asks the merchant if there are any others still imprisoned. The merchant replies that these are the only ones. No blondes and no children. Jed begins considering the possibilities. Children are expensive, so Lisa was probably already sold or is being held in a larger facility. That means Jed will also have to pay a visit to that slave trader, DeVito. As for the merchant, Jed gives him one last chance to act like a decent human being. He orders him to bring all the money from the safe and the prison keys too. Once he gets them, Jed locks the merchant inside the prison himself. He wants him to experience what it's like to be caged. All the freed slaves begin showering Jed with blessings in gratitude. Jed distributes the slave trader's entire fortune among them and has the Bahal Knights escort them to a lodging house. The slaves never imagined they would receive such kindness, but Jed tells them there's no need to thank him. He just hopes they make themselves comfortable. Over a shared meal, Jed listens to their life stories, hoping to gather unexpected bits of useful information. Today turns out to be one of those times. A man named Gordon shares that he used to be an assistant to the Cherville family. After the family's fall, he somehow ended up enslaved. Jed is surprised and asks if he really worked for the Chervilles, since he had heard that everyone in that family was executed. Gordon agrees, saying he believes heaven must have been on his side. The Cherville family were to blacksmiths what the Arahans are to mages. During their heyday, countless people sought even a single piece of their magic-forged equipment. But then, the Imperial Army suddenly slaughtered them for alleged treason. The Cherville family has faded into history, with no one even daring to mention their name. This wasn't just part of the Empire's history. It was true even in the game storyline Jed knew. Now that no direct descendants remain to inherit their techniques, it's a huge loss for the Empire, especially as it continues to battle magical beasts. Gordon shows his hands, which are in rough shape, and laughs, calling it all just faded glory. Jed agrees it's a real shame. If Cherville's techniques had been passed down, they could have produced incredible magical tools. It's a personal loss for Jed as well. Then Gordon says he wants to share something, just in case it might help, but only with Jed. He prefers to keep it a secret secret. Jed understands and encourages him to go ahead, but Gordon is still hesitant because of the people around. So Jed suggests they talk somewhere more private. Gordon immediately agrees. Once in a secluded spot, Gordon reveals a bombshell. The true heir of the Cherville family, Mr. Lacto, is still alive. Jed, shocked, almost shouts in surprise, but Gordon quickly hushes him and urges him to lower his voice. Jed then asks where Lacto is. Gordon explains that the head assistant sacrificed himself in Mr. Lacto's place, switching clothes and disfiguring his own face with fire to avoid recognition. If all went according to plan, Mr. Lacto should be hiding in Myers by now. Jed is stunned. This is game-changing information. However, even if Lacto survived, he would still be hunted as a traitor for the rest of his life. Meeting him won't be easy. Still, Jed sincerely thanks Gordon for trusting him with this. Gordon says he only revealed the truth because Jed seemed trustworthy. He simply asks Jed to ensure that no harm comes to Mr. Lacto. Jed promises not to let anything bad happen and reassures Gordon. For now, they decide to head back. It's not good to stay away for too long. Gordon understands, and they head back inside. Later, we see Leo looking worried and sighing. Jed asks him why he isn't eating. Has he lost his appetite? Jed reassures him that there's no need to be so upset. The slave trader they met today was just a small fry. Once they visit DeVito's place tomorrow, he's confident they'll find something for sure. Leo still doesn't feel entirely at ease, but he knows there's not much else he can do. Suddenly, Gordon asks if Jed just mentioned the name DeVito. Jed confirms with a simple yes. Gordon immediately warns him that DeVito is absolutely off limits. He's on a completely different level compared to the other slave trader. Gordon asks if Jed knows who is backing DeVito. For Jed, it doesn't matter how powerful DeVito's backers are. He has the Bahal squad with him, so he doesn't see any reason to worry. But Gordon reveals that DeVito's connections span the entire empire. In fact, there's even a rumor that his biggest client is none other than the Arahan family. Hearing the name Arahan leaves Jed momentarily stunned. Still, he finds it hard to believe. Why would the Arahans from the west come all the way to the south just to do business? Gordon explains that there's a reason: guaranteed profits. The enemy's loss is their gain. If DeVito buys up all the slaves from the south, the noble families here, Bahal included, will be in serious trouble. After hearing all this, even Jed has to admit that it sounds exactly like something the Arahan family would do. He begins to wonder if the Black Army is actually protecting DeVito. If that's the case, then this is no longer just about shutting down a slave trader. It would be the same as silently declaring war between Bahal and Arahan. Jed then notices how Leo is starting to worry, clearly feeling guilty that his request might be causing too much trouble. So Jed tells him not to worry. This isn't just about Leo. It's also about doing the right thing. Leo is taken aback, surprised by the conviction in Jed's voice. Jed simply confirms it. Yes, he's just acting according to his beliefs. No matter what he has to do, Jed is determined to do everything in his power to deal with that slave trader. The next day, at DeVito's slave market, Jed arrives and walks straight ahead, ignoring all the guards standing around. He keeps moving forward, unfazed. One of the guards follows him, calling him a bastard and demanding to know where he thinks he's going. Jed calmly asks just one question: where is DeVito? The guards question him back. Just who the hell is he? Do they have any idea where they are right now? Since he looks like a young noble, they don't attack immediately, but they do warn him that this is the kind of place where even nobles can lose their lives if they act out of line. Jed says he's heard they're connected to Arahan, so he understands why they're so arrogant. But then he reveals his own Arahan eyes. The moment they see his red eyes, the guards immediately drop to their knees, begging for mercy. They apologize profusely, saying they didn't recognize him earlier and now just want to be forgiven. A hooded man is also present. Jed wonders if this could be DeVito, but judging by his outfit and behavior, he's likely just a subordinate. Still, based on the way he's reacting, Jed guesses he must be from the Black Army. He had suspected it already but didn't want it to be true. Then another figure appears and asks what brings such an esteemed guest to a shabby place like this. He mentions that he heard about yesterday how Jed robbed the slave shop in the harbor. This confirms something important for Jed. The Arahan name won't work on this guy. He's not going to kneel. The man says he didn't think Jed would actually come all the way here. He calls Jed either bolder than expected or just too naive to know better. Jed doesn't waste time. He declares that, as of today, Arahan is cutting off all ties with DeVito and that he's taking the slaves with him. He asks the man to cooperate, but instead of reacting with concern, the man bursts out laughing. He apologizes for laughing like that, but says he just couldn't help himself. Jed, now silently watching, has nothing to say in return. After a brief pause, guards who had been kneeling earlier now stand up and start laughing along with him. The man says that's enough chit-chat. Though he won't kill Jed since he's technically an esteemed guest, he suggests Jed should consider this a life lesson. The guards begin to surround Jed, making it clear that he has no choice but to fight. One silver lining, though, there appears to be only one Black Army member among them, and Jed can't yet tell what circle he belongs to. If he's around the 5th circle, Jed should be able to handle him. If he can take him down first with a preemptive strike, this could turn into a great opportunity. But before anything happens, a commanding voice suddenly echoes through the area. "Surround the building!" Jed immediately recognizes the voice. It's Taurus. Taurus's voice booms with authority as he commands, "Boys, Group 1 and Group 2, move in and take these guys down." With that, Taurus unleashes his incredible aura, drawing everyone's attention entirely to him. Taurus immediately proclaims, "By the Emperor's decree, take these men down." The man inside is shocked, wondering aloud what Lord Bahal is doing there. But before he can fully process the situation, he collapses to the ground after a swift slash, confused about what just happened, until he sees a severed head rolling toward him. Terrified, he realizes the gravity of the situation. Taurus then confronts the slave trader, DeVito, declaring that he is under arrest for the crimes of illegal kidnapping, unlawful detainment of the powerless, and tarnishing Bahal's honor by committing disgraceful acts in its southern territory. As the Lord of Bahal, Taurus announces that he will take DeVito's limbs as an example to others. Jed stands beside him. The two pairs of eyes, ones that were expected to direct malice toward each other, are now united, focused solely on DeVito. He's completely stunned, unable to make sense of what's happening. The absurdity is too much for him, and he drops to his knees, begging for mercy. He promises that if he's spared, he'll never commit such acts again. But in the next moment, one of his limbs is gone, and the next moment, another. Now he can't even bring his hands together to beg. Desperate, he pleads again, asking for mercy, but Taurus responds with another strike, ending it decisively. With that, the situation on the 1st floor is fully resolved. Jed calls it perfect timing, though he does ask about what Taurus said earlier, something about an emperor's decree. Taurus confirms that it's exactly as it sounded. The emperor has officially issued a decree to eradicate all slave traders. A truly benevolent ruler, he says. Jed is a bit surprised and asks if Taurus has already dealt with the others too. Taurus explains that night squads were dispatched to all major locations, but since this one was the most prominent, he came personally. He then turns to Jed, asking why he's here, because the last thing he wants to hear is that Jed came to take down DeVito by himself. Jed, somewhat sheepishly, admits that yes, that was exactly his plan. There was something he needed to confirm. Taurus acknowledges that unlocking mana at Jed's age is certainly impressive, but he reminds him that he's not yet at the level where he should be taking on such dangerous tasks alone. He doesn't want Jed to overexert himself. Jed wonders if Taurus is implying that he himself is a 6th circle mage. Whatever the case, the Emperor's decree definitely came at a very convenient time. Taurus then orders his knights to search the interior and report back if they find any slaves. However, Jed is also concerned. He knows that Arahan won't just let this slide. His eyes fall on the Black Army member. Unlike the others, this man has a resigned expression. Jed wonders whether he didn't fight back because he couldn't or because he didn't want to. If it's the latter, that would indicate an immense level of loyalty to the Arahan bloodline. Suddenly, a knight rushes in with news. They found slaves in the basement. Once again, dozens of captives are brought out and finally regain their freedom. Leo watches closely, scanning every face, hoping to spot his sister. In total, it's estimated that around 600 people were held there. Taurus gives the order that if a blonde girl is found, she should be brought directly to Leo. Suddenly, Leo spots a blonde woman. Thinking she must be Lisa, he rushes toward her and calls out, but as he gets closer, he realizes it's not her. He apologizes quietly, disappointed. She's definitely not the same cute Lisa he once knew. So far, about 500 people have come out, and the hope of finding Lisa begins to fade. Leo is heartbroken. It's a cruel reality, but young girls are highly sought after. They're expensive and popular. There's a real chance she's already been sold elsewhere. Even so, Jed urges Leo not to give up. They continue searching, but no matter how hard they look, nothing changes. Finally, a knight informs Lord Taurus that the group of slaves that just exited were the last ones. Leo's heart sinks, and even Jed is left with nothing more to say. As dusk falls, the horses are prepared, and the knights begin their departure. One knight informs Lord Taurus that As per the Emperor's decree, they will now escort the rescued slaves to the Imperial Palace. Taurus praises both Leo and Jed, saying they worked hard today. He also promises that the crackdown on slave traders will continue tomorrow, and he hopes they'll be able to find Lisa soon. Jed is genuinely grateful for all the help Taurus is giving them. Suddenly, a nearby horse gets startled by someone, causing a girl to fall. Taurus scolds the horse, telling it not to get startled when someone is standing so close. Then he rushes to the girl's side and asks if she's alright, but something about her features catches his attention. She's a blonde girl and quite cute. Jed turns to Leo and asks if he saw a girl like this earlier. But Leo, still heartbroken and lost in thought, doesn't respond. He's barely registering what anyone says. However, he really should pay attention to this girl, because she's someone very special. Before Leo can react, the girl herself looks at him and immediately calls out, recognizing him as her brother. Her voice pulls Leo out of his sadness. He looks up, stunned, and instantly recognizes her. It's Lisa. He runs to her and embraces her tightly. Lisa bursts into tears, overjoyed to finally be reunited with her long-lost brother. Jed figures she must have gone unnoticed before because of her hood. Whatever the reason, it's not a comforting thought to realize how close they came to missing her. But thanks to the startled horse, they managed to find her in the end. Even Taurus is moved by the emotional reunion. He quietly wipes away a tear. Jed teases him, asking why he's crying. Embarrassed, Taurus quickly hides his face and insists he's not crying. Jed jokes that maybe something got in his eye. Taurus calls Jed cold-hearted and wonders how he's not crying after witnessing such a touching moment. He accuses Jed of having definitely cried too. After the successful mission, they all decide to celebrate with a grand feast. Everyone cheers and enjoys to their heart's content, sparing no expense. Every kind of premium meat is brought out. Even Lisa is shocked to see such a lavish celebration. Taurus offers some food to Lisa and tells her there's no need to hold back. He wants her to eat as much as she likes and feel comfortable. Lisa immediately thanks him sincerely from the bottom of her heart. But Taurus gently says there's no need for such formality. Since Leo is his friend, that makes her his friend too. He adds that she can even think of Jed like an older brother. He may seem cold, but he's a good guy. What's amusing is that Taurus himself wants to be considered a friend, but he suggests Lisa see Jed as a brother. Internally, Jed can't help but think how odd it is to be 40 years old and hanging out with a 15-year-old friend and his 13-year-old sister. It feels a bit strange. They keep offering Lisa more and more food, teasing that no matter how much she wants, her brother will get it for her. After all, his friends are super rich. Lisa is amazed by it all. Leo even bets that he's probably the only one who can say he has both Bahal and Arahan as friends. The cheerful conversation between the young siblings lightens the mood more than ever. Perhaps this is the first truly peaceful day Jed has had since arriving in this world, and he's genuinely happy, not just for himself, but also for Leo. But then, suddenly, a knight barges in and urgently calls out for Lord Taurus. Jed instantly recognizes him. It's Bahal's vice-captain, Philip. Taurus asks why the vice-captain is here. Philip explains he came in a hurry because of a declaration from the Lord. But Taurus is confused. He hasn't been informed about any declaration or specific orders. Without warning, Philip draws his sword and points it straight at Jed's throat. Jed had really hoped this day would remain peaceful, but once again, something finds a way to mess it up. So much for his plan of a quiet, restful evening. Now that's out the window. Philip then declares that the Lord has ordered Arahan to be brought before him immediately. While they were traveling in a carriage, the guy starts explaining the rules. He says the first rule is not to make eye contact with the Lord. The second is to kneel before him. The third, well, he doesn't get to finish because someone interrupts. Jed Arahan cuts him off, asking who he thinks he is to be giving orders like that. The man snaps back, reminding him that this is Bahal's land and warning that if he doesn't show proper manners, he'll just kill him. Jed calmly tells him that it's actually he who should be showing proper manners, and reminds him not to forget that he's from the Arahan family. Then the scene shifts to Bahal's territory, where Jed feels the real game has finally begun. He doesn't know what Lord Fernando Bahal is planning, but as a member of the Arahan family, he knows he has to act with dignity. Some instinct deep inside tells him that's the only way he'll survive. If he bows, they'll see him as weak, but if he stands tall, he risks angering them. Either way, it's dangerous. Later, when he reaches the gate, he's told to wait. Jed notices a reception room on the 5th floor, just like in the game. He figures that being called there instead of the 7th floor office means he's been invited as a guest, which sounds at least somewhat positive. But then, a sudden crushing pressure fills the air. A voice remarks that no one from the Arahan family has ever entered Bahal's mansion before. Jed freezes. He wonders if the Lord of Bahal is standing behind him right now. Just being near that presence makes him dizzy. He can't even turn around. Bahal isn't using any powers. If he were, Jed's trait would have reacted. This is just pure presence, the overwhelming aura of a knight who's surpassed the 10th circle and reached sword mastery. Bahal then walks past him. Even though Jed is terrified, he stands his ground. Bahal takes a seat on the throne, studies him for a moment, and acknowledges his spirit. He tells Jed that while he admires his courage, this is Bahal's grand estate, and proper manners are expected here. Jed, however, reminds himself that kneeling would be dishonorable. Yielding to the strong would only make them look down on him forever. So instead, he lowers his head slightly and thanks Bahal for inviting him. Bahal frowns and repeats the word, as if amused. Inviting? Jed Arahan explains that since he was brought there in a carriage and guided to the parlor, all the treatment so far has been proper for a guest. He adds that he came as a guest, but if kneeling before the Lord is a Bahal tradition, he'll follow it. Bahal stares at him, his expression growing even more serious. Jed starts to feel a bit nervous, but then Bahal suddenly laughs. He calls Jed a bold one and tells him to have a seat, saying he can't possibly leave a guest standing. Soon, Minar tea is served. Jed quietly notes to himself that, fortunately, he's being treated as a real guest, at least for now. Bahal notices his thoughtful look and tells him not to worry unnecessarily, saying he called him there out of personal curiosity. Jed simply responds that he understands. Then Bahal brings up the incident with the slave trader Divitu. He asks if Jed acted on the emperor's decree. Jed replies that he only heard about the decree after the matter had already been settled. Bahal seems intrigued and asks why he acted against the slaver even before hearing about the decree. Jed takes a moment to think. He realizes there are many things he could say to gain Fernando's favor, but he decides to speak only the truth. He explains that slave trading goes against human morality and that he acted according to his conscience. Besides, lying in front of a sword master wouldn't work anyway, he thinks to himself. Bahal then asks if Jed knew Divitu was working with his own family. Jed admits that he had thought it was just a rumor at first, but after meeting Divitu, he realized it was true. Bahal presses further, asking if Jed still chose to stop him despite knowing that connection. Jed answers that he simply judged what was right and wrong. It had nothing to do with family ties. Bahal warns that the Arahan family won't let this slide. Jed responds that he's fine with that, saying he did the right thing and has no regrets. Bahal studies him for a moment, impressed. He thinks to himself that Jed must understand the gravity of defying his own family, especially as a member of Arahan. And now, just because of Bahal's curiosity, Jed has placed himself in even greater danger. Bahal recalls what Taurus said and realizes it wasn't an exaggeration. Jed truly is a mage who understands honor. Finally, Bahal says it's getting late and tells Jed to stay for the night. He adds that if Jed is fine with it, he'll invite him to breakfast the next morning as well. Jed rises, expressing his appreciation for the hospitality, and offers Bahal a knight's salute, which Bahal notices. Bahal remarks that it's unusual to see a mage salute like a knight, adding that today truly feels special in many ways. Later that night, inside the guest room of the Grand Estate, Jed Arahan finally lets out a long sigh of relief. He admits to himself that he's just glad everything went smoothly. The whole situation has left him completely drained. He realizes that he only made it through because Fernando behaved exactly like his in-game personality. One wrong word, and he could have easily lost his head. Not trying to sound clever or lie might have been his best decision of the day. After a moment, he notices his stomach growling and admits he's getting a bit hungry. Just then, he hears a sound. Someone enters and sets down an impressive spread of food in front of him. The server politely tells him to enjoy his stay. Jed smiles, appreciating the gesture, and says it's very considerate. Then, something catches his eye. His expression freezes. What he's seeing shouldn't even be possible. He quickly looks around the room, scanning every corner. The people who just left a second ago, there are no shadows anywhere. Panic tightens in his chest as a thought hits him. How did the Black Army get here? His hand trembles slightly as he picks up a card lying among the dishes. On it, in clear letters, is written magic card number 0, return or stop. This time, it isn't the Lord of Bahal calling for him. It's the Lord of Arahan. Jed Arahan was clearly panicking. He couldn't believe what he'd just seen. He thought to himself that he never expected to encounter a Black Army magic card while staying inside the Bahal mansion. Just how far did the Arahan family's reach extend? Before he could think further, there was a knock on the door. A familiar voice called out, asking if he was inside. Jed quickly went to check and found Torres standing there. Jed asked about Leo and Lisa, wondering if Torres had come alone. Torres explained that he'd handled everything else but couldn't sit still out of concern for him. He said he'd heard what had happened and was relieved that Jed was safe, even mentioning that the Lord himself had invited Jed to breakfast. Jed gave a faint, tired smile and said that fortunate didn't really fit his situation. Torres then told him that the Lord had recognized what kind of person he truly was, and even decided to personally lift his wanted status. Jed was caught off guard. He repeated the words in disbelief, trying to process what he'd just heard. In his mind, he thought it was unexpected, almost too good to be true. If not for that magic card, the situation would have been perfect. But then reality settled in. If he couldn't escape the Arahan family's reach no matter where he went, maybe the only choice left was to face them head-on. After finishing the meal at the mansion, Torres decided to show him around. The two walked through the sprawling estate, visiting the knight's quarters and the training grounds. Jed tried to take it all in, but found himself oddly detached. Maybe he was just overwhelmed, but even seeing everything in real life, things he'd only known from the game, didn't excite him as much as he thought it would. Then something caught his eye. He pointed toward it and asked what it was. Torres explained that it was a special place, the stable where the white horse of Bahal chose its master. He said that was where the horses who hadn't yet found one were kept. But this time, there was only a single horse inside. As Torres extended his hand, the horse neighed loudly. He explained that normally, the white horses chose their master within 3 months, but this one had refused everyone for 2 years. Jed was surprised, but even more so when Torres added that this was the only horse that had ever refused the head of the Bahal family himself. Jed asked if that was even possible, saying he thought the horses always chose the strongest person. Torres replied that it wasn't always about strength. Each horse had its own standard. Jed found that intriguing and said as much. Torres smiled, pointing out that Jed hadn't shown interest in anything else, yet the white horse managed to capture his attention. Jed admitted that Bahal's white horses always looked amazing. Torres nodded, saying that there was a reason they were called spirit beasts. He added that the white horse of Bahal wasn't considered a possession, but a friend, a true companion. Torres explains that's why they respect the horse's choice. As Jed listens, he looks into the creature's eyes and finds them strikingly beautiful. Almost without thinking, he starts to step closer, drawn in by the calm intelligence in its gaze. He slowly reaches out a hand, curious to see if it will allow him to touch it. But before his hand makes contact, a voice cuts through the air behind him. Someone mockingly points out that it's the heir of Arahan himself. The sound of that voice makes Jed's expression tighten. He instantly remembers Philip. When he turns around, he sees Philip approaching, saying he'd spotted Sir Torres during training and came over to greet him, only to find him standing with Arahan. Torres reminds Philip that Jed is a guest personally invited by the head of the Bahal family and tells him to show some respect. Philip bows politely, but the gesture feels forced, and anyone could tell he wasn't being sincere. Still bowing, Philip suggests that Jed join them for some training. He points out that there's no warm meditation room here for mages, so maybe a spar would be a good way to loosen up. He even adds that it would be a great opportunity for the other knights to learn from him. Torres, sensing what Philip is really trying to do, steps in immediately and tells him to stop, reminding him again that Jed is a guest. But Philip insists that it isn't rude to ask for a spar. He says it would be beneficial for everyone, and harmless since it would just be a light match. He mentions that a new recruit joined recently, and that the recruit could probably take it easy on Jed. Before Torres can say another word, Jed cuts in and agrees. He says they might as well do it. Then he points toward the recruit, saying he'll take him on. Even the white horse seems to perk up, as if sensing the tension in the air. The group then heads over to a nearby training ground. The recruit picks up a wooden sword, explaining that since it's only a friendly match, that should be enough. Jed smirks slightly, telling him he'd better give it his all, or he'll regret it later. The recruit laughs and says he hopes Jed isn't all talk. Torres watches from the side, uneasy. He knows Jed has unlocked the lightning key, but the technique isn't even at the first circle yet. There's no way he can match a 5th circle knight. The recruit, radiating confidence, asks Jed if he really believes he has a chance of winning. Jed calmly says he figures his odds are about 50%. The recruit chuckles, gathering his aura and saying that's a pretty optimistic view. But Jed simply begins drawing out his own electric energy, lightning flickering faintly around him. He mutters that he'll just hold out until things start heating up, otherwise It wouldn't be much fun. Philip, watching from a distance, narrows his eyes. He realizes what he's seeing must be the lightning key, the very ability he'd only heard rumors about. As expected of the so-called dream attribute, Jed's lightning aura crackled through the air, raw and untamed, rougher and more explosive than any other power. Still, to anyone watching closely, his mana clearly wasn't even at the second circle yet. By all logic, the outcome of the match should have been obvious. The announcer gave the signal to begin. The recruit wasted no time, charging straight toward Jed. His movements were sharp and confident, and for a moment he couldn't help but wonder what Jed was doing. A mage standing still, not keeping distance, not chanting spells? Maybe Jed was just too slow to react. Felt almost disappointing. He told himself he'd have to pull his strikes a bit. He couldn't exactly kill a guest. But then, before the first blow could even connect, both Torres and Philip froze in shock. Jed wasn't slow at all. In a blur, he stepped aside, dodging effortlessly. The white horse in the nearby stable let out a sharp neigh, its eyes gleaming as if it sensed the surge of power in the air. Then came a calm, almost commanding voice. It was Jed's. He warned the knight that this would be the last time he'd hold back, and told him to give it everything he had. The recruit barely had time to process it before he lunged again, this time attacking in earnest. But Jed moved like lightning itself, dodging each strike with almost casual precision. Every motion was clean, minimal, and deliberate, like he already knew where each attack would land. The recruit grew frustrated, his swings becoming faster and wilder, but nothing worked. Jed sidestepped one final strike, then countered with a devastating lightning-charged punch. The impact was explosive. The recruit's wooden sword flew out of his hand, spinning across the ground. A second punch connected cleanly with his jaw, sending him crashing backward across the training ground. Philip could only stare, completely stunned. Even Torres, who knew Jed's potential better than anyone, was left speechless. Jed, however, remained calm. He had expected this outcome. There was no arrogance in his eyes, just quiet satisfaction, a sense that his training was finally paying off. The white horse snorted softly from the distance, its gaze fixed on him. Even it seemed impressed. The moment the recruit hit the ground, everyone rushed toward him in panic. Several knights shouted at once, trying to snap him out of it, but there was no response. Someone quickly realized he wasn't just dazed. He had completely lost consciousness. The healer was called immediately, and the group crowded around in growing concern. Amid the commotion, Arahan stood calmly, sparks of electric energy still crackling faintly around his body. The others watched him with a mix of irritation and disbelief. To them, it looked like arrogance, standing there unbothered while their comrade lay unconscious. One of the knights, clearly furious, stepped forward and pointed his sword toward Arahan, declaring that he would take him on next. His anger drowned out all reason. Before the situation could escalate, Torres stepped between them, his voice sharp with authority. He reminded everyone that the sparring match was over and ordered them to return to their posts. But another voice spoke up, insisting that Torres move aside. This knight's eyes burned with determination. He too wanted to challenge Arahan. Torres frowned, both confused and exasperated. Were they seriously planning to keep fighting here, in the middle of the training grounds? He couldn't believe how quickly pride had replaced reason. In his mind, he analyzed the situation. The knights had completely abandoned the proper sense of distance and timing. Their losses weren't due to a difference in skill, but because they were shackled by fixed ideas, too rigid to adapt. Objectively, any Fifth Circle Knight here was far stronger than Arahan in raw power. Yet it no longer mattered. Tempers had already taken over, and now more knights were gathering. This was spiraling out of control. Arahan placed a hand gently on Torres's shoulder, his expression calm but firm. He said that one fight should be enough, and that accepting defeat was also part of a knight's spirit. That single remark hit a nerve. The knights around him grew visibly angry, their faces tightening with offense. One of them shouted back, accusing Arahan of mocking their honor. To them, a mage lecturing about the knight's spirit was an insult, but Arahan remained composed. He reminded them that he had only sparred because they requested it, and that he had done so in the heart of the Bahal family itself. Surely they understood what that implied. Inwardly, he reflected on how different it would be if the situation were reversed. If a knight had walked into the Arahan family grounds demanding a spar from one of their mages. Then suddenly, the air grew heavy. A powerful aura swept through the field like a silent wave, freezing everyone in place. Arahan immediately recognized it, the same overwhelming pressure he had sensed before. A calm, commanding voice echoed across the training ground. The lord of the Bahal family had arrived. Every knight instantly dropped to one knee, swords sheathed without hesitation. Even Torres lowered his head in respect. Arahan turned his gaze toward the approaching figure, astonished. With a perception stat of 100, he hadn't sensed the man's presence at all. So this was the realm of a true sword master. The lord spoke, his tone both proud and composed. He declared that Arahan's sparring in the Bahal family's training grounds was something worthy of being recorded in their history. Arahan bowed slightly, apologizing for his rudeness and explaining that he hadn't meant to cause trouble. He had simply accepted a challenge he couldn't refuse. The lord smiled faintly, acknowledging that Arahan was known for never turning down a fight. Bahal turned to the knights and raised his voice. He told them they'd all seen what real training meant, that leveling up wasn't everything. What mattered more was the experience, and how you turned it into your own strength. Everyone bowed their heads and replied in unison, even Torres. Jed could feel there was something more behind Bahal's words, though. It didn't sound like simple praise. It felt like a warning wrapped in nice words. Bahal was testing him. Bahal looked back at him again and said that Jed had given the knights a good lesson, and that he'd remember what happened today. Jed smiled politely but thought to himself that this was more like sitting on a bed of nails than getting a compliment. Then, just when things seemed to calm down, the ground started to rumble with the sound of hooves. Everyone turned to look. The same white horse that had refused to choose a master earlier came running across the field, faster than before. Torres frowned, completely confused. What's going on? Jed wondered out loud too, watching the horse circle the field. Torres quickly explained that this wasn't normal, that when a white horse showed this kind of energy, it meant it had finally found its master. Everyone went quiet as that thought sank in. The horse suddenly turned and ran straight toward Jed. People gasped. Philip's jaw dropped. Even Torres couldn't believe what he was seeing. The white horse, it's chosen you, Torres said, almost whispering. Even Bahal looked surprised. He said that something like this would shock even the previous heads of the Bahal family. Jed just blinked, pointing at himself like, me? Seriously? Bahal's expression shifted. His aura flared slightly, and Jed could feel that pressure again, that overwhelming presence. Bahal looked deep in thought, probably wondering why his family's sacred beast would choose someone from the Arahan house. Was it respect, fate, or just pure instinct? Jade hesitated for a second, then reached out his hand toward the horse. Bahal finally spoke again, his voice calm but serious, asking if Jed Arahan would acknowledge Jinju, the horse's name, as his comrade, and promised to stay with her for life. Jed blinked. Jinju. He wasn't expecting that. The whole stay with her for life part threw him off even more. It almost sounded like some weird wedding vow. Jinju neighed softly, tilting her head as she looked at him. Her eyes were so clear and full of emotion that Jed couldn't help but stare back. Around them, everyone watched quietly, the moment hanging in the air. It felt like something big was starting, something he didn't fully understand yet, but couldn't walk away from either. Arahan stared at Jinju for a moment, asking him to choose her. It was kind of surreal, but with the mare clearly wanting him, and Bahal's intense aura pressing down so heavily, Jed didn't have the heart to say no. For now, he simply nodded and agreed that he would honor the bond. The mare's reaction was immediate. She neighed happily, clearly thrilled. Jed, however, couldn't help thinking to himself that her expression was far too serious for comfort. Before he could dwell on it, a voice cut through the moment in alarm. Philip shouted that this was unacceptable. In the history of the family, he reminded everyone, only Bahal's members had ever ridden the white horse. Allowing anyone else to do so would set a dangerous precedent. Bahal nodded, acknowledging the point but pointing out that until now, the master had always been chosen from within the family simply because no other option had ever been given. Philip, furious, pressed on, reminding everyone of the past atrocities committed by the Arahan family against Bahal's white horse, how they had treated it cruelly, like nothing more than livestock. He demanded how they could possibly entrust such a comrade to them. Bahal, calm and unshaken, explained that was why Jed had made a promise. His word would bind him. Philip, though, only grew more enraged. He didn't even hesitate to argue in front of the Lord himself, shouting that mages lied as easily as they breathed. How could Bahal trust this promise? Bahal's response was simple but terrifying. If Jed Arahan didn't consider the white horse a comrade, he would personally take his life. Both Torres and Jed froze, panic rising at the sheer weight of that declaration. Even so, Philip tried to protest again. The Lord cut him off without a second thought. He said he had never doubted Philip's loyalty, but on this matter, he would hear no further advice. Philip clenched his fists, swallowing the anger threatening to burst out, and finally muttered a reluctant yes. As night fell and the moon rose, the air was filled with motion. Someone came charging past, Arahan riding the white horse. While racing through the forest, Jed laughed to himself, thinking that staying any longer in Bahal's territory had been too risky. Now this was far better. This was pure fun. He shouted aloud, grinning, telling Jinju that he really liked her. It was beyond anything he had expected. The horse responded, galloping faster, and together they tore through the forest. Jed shouted to keep running, pushing toward Frilda in one exhilarating burst. Meanwhile, Lisa and Leo watched in disbelief. Leo's jaw dropped as he tried to make sense of the scene. Not only had Arahan returned alive from Bahal's territory, he had done the impossible. He had brought back the legendary white horse. Leo tells Jed that he can do anything he wants and that he's proud to be his friend. Jed responds that they should go inside and talk, as there's a lot to discuss. Once inside, Arahan explains everything to Leo about the Black Mirror Corp's magic cards, the demonic essence, and even lacto-chervil. He then tells Leo that he has no choice but to go to Arahan now. There's no way to avoid it. Leo stays quiet for a moment, then says that if Jed is going to Arahan, he'll follow him. Jed recalls that Leo had said last time he never abandons his comrades, and he tells him that he appreciates the thought, though it's complicated. Leo interrupts, insisting that he wants to act as Jed's servant. He reminds Jed that he's been exiled for so long and probably has no retainers left, and that the Arahan family is full of intense sibling rivalries, leaving little room for trustworthy allies. Jed admits that's true. Looking at Lisa, Leo points out that she's capable and has done plenty of chores, and he tells Jed that if they all serve him, they'll be helpful. Jed considers it silently and reflects in his mind that, while it might have been right to part ways with Leo before, seeing Leo still wanting to stay with him makes it impossible to refuse. Jed then tells them he accepts and that they'll go to Arahan together. But even as he says this, he thinks ahead. He can't just go recklessly. They need a foothold. The only options now are lacto-chervil, the last surviving member of the exterminated blacksmith family, and the demonic essence obtained from the Basilisk. He reasons that holy water will be needed to turn the demonic essence into an elixir, and to resolve both problems, they have no choice but to go to Myers. He wonders how long the Arahan family head will wait before taking action. The next morning, Jed tells the group to get ready, and they all leave together, riding along with the beautiful white horse. The sun rises as they move forward, each of them determined and prepared for whatever awaits them. Leo looks genuinely surprised and asks what Arahan is doing with all the gold bars, noting that it totals a whopping 500 gold coins and wondering what could possibly require that much. Even Lisa hadn't expected this, but she stays calm as she watches Arahan sit in front of Leo. He explains that even 500 coins might not be enough. He tells them that the elixir he's trying to make requires pouring holy water into demonic essence, and that the success rate depends entirely on the divine power of the holy water used. Ordinary holy water won't work, no matter how many bottles are used. In his mind, Arahan calculates the cost. With the average price of holy water at 10 gold coins per bottle, he'll need about 50 bottles. It's going to be tight, and if he spends all that money and fails, he might end up crying. That's why he came to Myers. He can trust that priest. Leo asks if he's really taking all of it, suggesting they leave at least 1 gold bar as emergency cash. Arahan shakes his head and says no, pointing out that they still have some silver coins left. He tells Leo that he's heading out for a bit and asks him to find someone for him. Leo asks who, and Arahan says the old man he mentioned yesterday, Lacto, the one-eyed, white-haired man. Leo points out that there are probably a ton of old, one-eyed, white-haired men around, but Arahan shows him a pile of silver coins on the table, explaining that he should offer to pay and gather all such men in one place. Leo realizes that makes it easy to spot the right person. Arahan clarifies that they don't have much money overall, but since Lacto is a fugitive, he won't appear just for a few coins. When Leo asks how they'll find him, Arahan tells him they just need to figure out who doesn't show up. He also reminds Leo that Lacto won't use his real name, so he shouldn't call him Lacto either. Leo nods, promising to do his best, and Arahan thanks him, saying he's counting on him. With that, Arahan leaves with his suitcase. In his mind, he thinks about how he had originally planned to use the money to buy magic tools, but after hearing lacto-chervil's story from Gordon, he changed his plans. Now, the money will go toward making the elixir and getting Lacto on his side to commission him for magic tool crafting. That's the best possible outcome, he tells himself. At least that's what he's hoping for. If it works, it could make up for his low magic stat quite a bit. As he walks, something catches his attention, and he murmurs to himself thoughtfully. A voice calls out over the crowd, telling everyone to line up properly and warning against cutting in line in front of the cathedral. It doesn't matter if you're noble, commoner, or peasant, the order must be kept. The voice scans the massive crowd, making sure no one tries to sneak ahead. Arahan arrives and takes in the scene, thinking to himself that this is a cathedral. Why is there such a huge crowd? Could Johan's divine power really have become famous so quickly? That seemed way too soon. He leans over and asks the person in front of him what's going on. The man explains that holy water is being sold at half price, which is why everyone's here. Arahan is surprised but doesn't react outwardly, thinking to himself that this is actually a great opportunity. More holy water means he can turn more demonic essences into elixirs. But then he notices the catch. Holy water takes divine power to create, usually only 1 bottle per day. So how could there be so much holy water available for sale? Something doesn't add up. As the line slowly moves forward, the priest inside calls the next person. Arahan thinks to himself that he's only seen Father Johan in the game, so recognizing him by face alone is tricky. He steps forward and greets him formally. The man in front immediately responds politely, asking how many bottles he needs. Arahan goes quiet for a moment, his expression serious, and comments that the priest must be busy working all day. The man seems confused and asks what he's talking about. Without another word, Arahan slams something nearby and accuses him of being an imposter, insisting that there is only one Father Johann Chris at Myers Cathedral and demanding to know where the real Father Johann is. The man bursts out laughing and says he doesn't know what Arahan is talking about. He claims he really is Johann. Then, brandishing something sharp that glints in the light, he tells Arahan that if he has no other business, he should leave, reminding him that many people are waiting behind him. Arahan freezes for a moment, realizing this isn't going to be as simple as he expected. A voice from behind shouts at the crowd, complaining about the long line and saying that his child is sick, pleading for people to hurry. Arahan immediately warns the man that messing with the cathedral won't go unreported and threatens to inform the local garrison. The fraud just shrugs and says that if he's done anything wrong, he'll accept the punishment. Then he leans in close and whispers in Jed's ear, warning him to get lost if he doesn't want to die and not to get in the way of busy people. Jed doesn't respond. As day turns into night, Arahan sits quietly, thinking. He isn't even afraid of the Imperial Army, but he wonders whether the garrison could be backing these frauds. The Central Army enforces the Empire's law, but local garrisons in small towns are often corrupt. While writing a letter, he reflects that the situation might not be as simple as it looks, and since he doesn't know the full picture, he decides to check it out himself. He leaves the letter behind and sets off. Riding through the night, he reminds himself that there's a garrison fortress in Myers. That must be the place. When he arrives, he notices something familiar and murmurs to himself that it looks like Bahal's. Suddenly, the guards notice him and remark on Bahal's white horse. One of them immediately salutes Arahan and asks what brings him here. Jed says he has something to report and asks whether the general is inside. The guards ask if he made an appointment, and when he admits he hasn't, they tell him that's a problem and he'll need to come back. Jed presses, asking if the general is really that busy. One guard explains that it's not about being busy, it's just the general's policy. He never meets anyone without an appointment. Jed questions them further, pointing out that if the garrison is supposed to manage the region, shouldn't important reports be checked rather than sending people away? The guard apologizes, saying they're just following orders. Jed thinks there's no point arguing with low-ranking soldiers, but he still doesn't feel right leaving like this. Then, one of the guards salutes someone else. Jed turns and spots a figure, instantly realizing in his mind that this must be the general. He notes that the man doesn't look like he takes care of himself much for a knight. He's clearly not in great shape. The general looks at Jed and asks who he is. Jed replies that he has something important to report. The general immediately questions why Jed is riding Bahal's white horse, implying he might have stolen it. Jed explains that it was a gift. In his mind, Jed notes that the general doesn't care about the report at all. If it weren't for Jinju, he wouldn't even be giving him a second glance. The general scoffs, saying he's never heard of anyone giving away a white horse and asks which order Jed belongs to, noting that he doesn't even look like a knight. Jed calmly tells him he's just a mage from a minor family. Even the horse seems displeased with the general, tossing its head and showing obvious unease. The general laughs, mocking Jed for daring to claim Bahal's white horse as a gift. Jed stays calm and insists that the general should hear his report first. The general questions him, and Jed quickly explains that there's a fake priest selling fake holy water at Myers Cathedral. cathedral, something extremely valuable. Before Jed can say anything else, the general's voice booms over the courtyard, ordering the guards to arrest him immediately. Jed is shocked in his mind. He's barely started talking, but the guards quickly surround him and his horse. The general commands them to throw him in jail and confiscate the white horse. At that moment, Jed realizes the entire thing is a setup. The garrison is in on it. His gut feeling had been right. The general taunts him, saying the kid will regret acting so cocky, and orders the guards to take him away. They comply, dragging Jed off as a prisoner. Jed, still composed, thinks to himself that the one who'll regret this is the general, even as the man threatens to break him until his bones crack. Meanwhile, at Bahal's mansion, Bahal watches as the emperor announces a great honor. Taurus bows and asks whether their family rescued the most people. The emperor confirms that the Bahal family saved 3,720 imperial citizens from slavers, while Arahan rescued 2,580. Normally, the emperor avoids stirring rivalry between knights and mages, seeking balance and harmony, but this time he's openly showing the rankings. Bahal notes to himself that the emperor must be very interested in this matter. Bahal notes that it's significant the Bahal family made the greatest contribution. The emperor tells him he'll need to go receive the imperial reward, warning that it's a long trip and to prepare early. Taurus, still puzzled and sensing some tension in Bahal's aura, asks what's going on. Just then, another figure enters, bowing respectfully. He reports that a boy is waiting outside the estate, asking to see Bahal. The man had been about to turn him away, but the boy insisted that he's a friend of Taurus and Jed Arahan, so the messenger decided to check. A voice from the back asks if the boy's name is Lu, and the messenger confirms that he really knows Taurus. Taurus asks why Lu has come all the way here. The king, now curious, observes silently. Taurus offers to meet him himself, but Bahal insists that they bring Lu inside, reasoning that Jed Arahan must have sent him. Taurus is surprised, asking if Jed really did send him. The emperor, projecting a furious yet controlled aura, says the boy claims he has something to tell him and that he should hear him out. The letter the boy carries is revealed, and Bahal reads it. It commends Jed Arahan for helping imperial citizens without regard for status, urging that all nobles should follow his example and lead through action. The emperor's aura sharpens as the meaning of the letter sinks in. Bowing nervously, Lu says he can't believe someone as lowly as him is allowed to meet the great lord of the Bahal family. The king interrupts, asking what Lu wants to see him about. Lu thanks him for his heavenly grace and then presents a letter, Jed's note, which he had been tasked to deliver if Jed didn't return by nightfall. Taurus hands the letter over to Bahal. Bahal takes it, thinking to himself that the emperor's official document even mentions Arahan's name. He muses, I may have won the battle, but I lost the war. He reasons that even if the letter might seem trivial, he needs to read it himself. As he goes through it, Bahal's eyes widen. The contents describe Myers Cathedral's priests selling fake holy water, abusing faith for fraud, officials who ignored reports of suspicious corruption, and suspected collusion with the local garrison, all carefully written for Bahal to see. Is this really the insight of a 15-year-old boy? He thinks. At the end, it instructs that if Jed doesn't return by nightfall, the letter should be delivered to Bahal. Bahal nods in understanding, realizing why Jed worded it that way. Leo, still worried, admits that he was concerned something might have happened to Jed and apologizes for coming on his own. Bahal praises him, saying he must have been scared but still found the courage to act for his friend, calling it an honorable act. Leo looks up, surprised. Bahal then orders some food to be brought for Leo and says he'll write a letter while Leo eats. Overwhelmed, Leo repeatedly thanks him while bowing, thinking to himself, just now he called me honorable. Knights really are amazing people. A maid brings the food, and Leo begins eating, noting that it tastes far better than what they get at Barty's home. Meanwhile, in a dark, filthy cell, rats and cockroaches scurry around in search of water. Tied up by his legs and hands, Arahan is exhausted but still going through his exercises. A guard stands nearby, shaking his head and thinking, that crazy bastard's been at it for over 2 hours. A bored guard mutters that they hung Jed up for torture, but whatever the hell he's doing makes the guard feel like he's losing his mind. The smell in the cell is making everyone sick. The general arrives and a guard snaps to attention, reporting up the chain. The general asks why Jed is acting like that. The guard, saluting, says he doesn't know for sure, but that Jed's been repeating the same strange routine the whole time. Every guard on duty before him gave the same report. The general notes that Jed must be tough, and they open the cell to drag him out. The general tells Jed that depending on his answers, he might be released or subjected to worse torture. He asks whether Jed cast a spell on Bahal's white horse. Jed replies that the horse only listens to the master it chose, no spell involved. The general scoffs at the idea that a knight's warhorse would choose a mage and says Jed will find out otherwise. He complains that the torture must have been too light and announces he'll handle things personally, boasting that no one lasts 30 minutes under his methods. He picks up a sharp dagger, warns Jed that this is his last chance to talk, and describes the kind of bone-deep pain he's willing to inflict. Jed just tells him to fuck off, smiling through it. That enrages the general, who calls him every name in the book, until a messenger suddenly bursts in, shouting that a letter has arrived from Bahal. The general throws the dagger aside in annoyance and demands to know what the fuss is about, telling the messenger not to disturb him during interrogations, unless it's urgent. The messenger insists it's urgent and hands over the letter. The general rips it open and reads. His face changes as he reads that the prisoner is the master of Bahal's white horse and a friend of Bahal. Bahal's letter is passed along and read aloud. It states that the prisoner is the master of the white horse, a friend of Bahal, and that he's come to Arahan. It accuses the garrison of suspected involvement in the Myers Cathedral corruption case, orders the general to step down and wait for the Central Army's investigation, and warns that if the order is ignored, Bahal will judge the matter himself. The general goes pale, incredulous. He asks what investigation and scoffs at the idea of Bahal threatening a general appointed by the emperor. Then he glares at Jed and accuses him of grinning all along, waiting for this moment, insisting that even Bahal can't just push around an imperial officer. Jed calmly replies that there's a clear justification for the claim. The general snarls that justification means nothing, that if he simply kills Jed and the fake priest, there'll be no evidence. At that, Jed's electric aura flares up. He thinks to himself that people like this only learn when they get knocked down. The surge of power makes the guards step back. The general blinks in genuine surprise and blurts out that this is lightning key. Chains snap into place out of nowhere and bind the general. Jed's first reaction is shock too. He hadn't expected that level of backup. He thinks, Black Mirror Corps among the common soldiers? How far does this organization reach? A voice from the escort announces that the Lord commands Jed to return immediately, and that they'll escort him. Jed asks in his head when that happened and mutters about how deep the organization's reach must be. Out loud, Jed asks why the return order was given. The mage guard just replies that there are no questions, only orders. The Lord's command must be followed. Jed tries one last time to buy time. He pleads that he still needs a few days to secure the elixir and to find lactocherval. The mage guard is firm and repeats that it's impossible. They simply follow the Lord's orders. Jed realizes he has to stall. He thinks that if he goes back right now, he's as good as dead, and the Lord must know that. The guards stay silent, the tension thick as they wait for him to decide. Jed tells the mage escort to convey a message to the Lord, ask for a little preparation time so he can survive in the family. He adds that if the Lord still orders him to return, he will comply without complaint. One of the guards acknowledges this and immediately leaves to deliver the message. Jed thinks to himself that the Lord of Arahan must have been watching his every move through the Black Mirror Corps. The biggest concerns are obvious: the killing of the slave merchant DeVito and his visit to the Bahal family. He knows there will be questions about both, so he has to prepare carefully. Soon, the leader of the Black Mirror Corps returns. He informs Jed that the Lord has agreed to give him time, but only a strict 14 days to return to the family. Jed realizes there's no room for extension. The countdown has officially begun. The countdown had begun, but Arahan thinks to himself that at least he's been given a bit of breathing room. 14 days, that's all he has. He tells himself he'll need to move fast. The leader of the Black Mirror Corps adds that the Lord has left the matters of Pullman and Myers Cathedral in Jed's hands. An investigator will arrive soon, and he's expected to handle things wisely. That's the Lord's message. It's a little surprising for Arahan. He says that an investigator is already on the way, even though he expected it would take at least a day. In his mind, he starts wondering if the Black Mirror Corps pulled strings for that too. The more he learns about them, the more he's impressed and honestly a bit envious of how efficient they are. Then the leader says there's one more thing. Jed asks what it is, and the leader explains that the Lord hopes he won't hide the fact that he's of Arahan blood anymore. Jed frowns at that, saying he doesn't quite understand. Then it hits him. Could they be talking about his lenses? He asks if they mean he's not supposed to wear them, and the leader confirms it. Jed can't help but feel irritated. He asks why they even care now, thinking how these same people didn't mind throwing him into prison earlier. The leader, however, simply says he's delivered all of the Lord's messages and leaves, just like that. Jed sighs, thinking how they always show up, say what they want, and vanish without any explanation. 2 hours later, the Imperial investigator, Cox, arrives. He says a young boy has done something remarkable by uncovering corruption within the Imperial Army, and he asks which family Jed belongs to. The Emperor, he says, intends to commend such achievements personally. Remembering the Lord's words, Jed removes his contact lenses. No more hiding. He then introduces himself, saying he's Jed Arahan, the 7th heir of the Arahan family. Cox is taken aback at first but quickly bursts into a laugh, saying what a coincidence it is. So this is the same Arahan mentioned in the Emperor's official document. Jed blinks in confusion, wondering what document he's talking about. Cox seems surprised that Jed doesn't know and explains that his name appears in an official letter written by the Emperor himself. He even shows the document, pointing out the mention of Arahan's name at the end. Cox says the Emperor praised him at the Imperial Palace and that he'd been eager to meet him in person. Jed still doesn't quite believe it and asks how the Emperor even knows about him. Cox explains that His Majesty often speaks freely with people, regardless of their rank, and that some of those who were recently rescued mentioned Arahan by name. Jed thinks quietly, could it be Gordon? Jed remembers Gordon saying he'd repay the favor, but he never imagined it would come back like this. Investigator Cox tells him the Emperor will be pleased, and that this is good news for Jed's family as well. Hearing the word family stirs something in Jed. Jed then asks Cox for one favor. He wants to handle the Myers Cathedral case to the end himself. Cox says he understands and agrees. Jed can finish what he started. While bowing, Jed thinks that Cox is exactly what you'd expect from a Central Army investigator, ready to give up personal credit and still back the right action without hesitation. Jed thanks him and Cox laughs, amused at receiving gratitude from an Arahan. He praises Jed's manners and calls it refreshing. Jed, in his head, wonders whether those so-called scoundrels are really all there is in Arahan. When Jed marches through town with the Central Army troops behind him, bystanders whisper and point. People ask what the Central Army is doing in Myers and trade rumors. That General Pullman was arrested, that he had a backdoor deal with the cathedral, and that the priest was a fake. The crowd is angry. At the cathedral entrance, Jed confronts the fraudsters directly. He tells them he'll count to 3 and that anyone who doesn't come out before then will die. When silence follows, one soldier suggests dragging them out by force. Jed warns that weapons and mana use are prohibited inside Imperial cathedrals and that it would be dangerous. Another soldier suggests waiting for authorization papers. Jed refuses to wait. He says he doesn't have time and that he'll handle it himself, asking the soldiers to stay put. The soldiers are shocked and worry aloud about what might go wrong, but Jed insists it's fine and steps forward. Some of the soldiers mutter that Jed can't use magic, so what tactic could he possibly have? Another suggests they should follow him in. Then Cox arrives with the authority papers, and the troops cheer that with authorization there's no reason to hesitate. Cox holds them back and explains that he gave Jed the command insignia specifically so Jed could finish the case himself. The soldiers push back, worried about armed men inside the cathedral and the liability if anything goes wrong. Cox asks them if they really understand why Arahan is feared and respected. When a guard answers that it's because Arahan is strong, Cox corrects him. Strength alone isn't the reason. Arahan always keeps their word. Jed opens the cathedral doors to reveal a huge group of fraudsters inside. Cox nods and says the real danger is people who don't care about means or methods. That's what makes them scary. The soldiers suddenly get it. Jed calls the fraudsters out, accusing them of cheating Imperial citizens, and walks in. Cox, watching, remarks that today's protagonist will be that Arahan. Screams erupt from inside, then the noise cuts off. The soldiers outside fret that Jed went in alone, but moments later figures start coming out, bound and defeated. Jed is the one who subdued them. Everyone is stunned. Cox, however, isn't surprised. He asks Jed how he managed to take them down without using mana. Jed says it wasn't that difficult. Cox congratulates him, saying once again that Arahan commands his respect. Jed tells Cox that the fraudsters were selling fake holy water, and that there are likely many victims, so the matter needs proper handling. Cox assures him that of course they will take care of everyone affected. Jed tells them that as the investigator, he'll take responsibility and handle the rest. Then he turns toward the cathedral and says that it's safe to come out now, addressing the father directly. Everyone watches as an elderly priest slowly steps out. Whispers spread immediately. People recognize him. Some shout that it's Father Aahan, and soon the crowd is in tears, thanking the Lord for keeping him alive. The fraudster, meanwhile, looks annoyed by all the commotion. But then Father Aahan steps forward and heals the very man who deceived everyone. Jed can feel it too, the warmth of the divine energy filling the room. He quietly notes that this must be divine power, a force so comforting that even an observer feels it deep within. The Father then tells everyone to repent and live according to the Lord's will, promising that the Lord will always be with them. One by one, people apologize and promise to change. The entire hall erupts in joyful praise as they chant that Father Aahan has returned. When things settle, the Father formally introduces himself again as Aahan Chris, the 49th Imperial Priest. He expresses his deep gratitude to Jed Arahan for fulfilling the Lord's will and invites him for tea. Jed agrees without hesitation. Before they can leave, Cox calls Jed over. He tells him that he wants to give him something as a token of appreciation. Jed looks at it and instantly realizes it's no ordinary gift. It's the investigator's insignia, a symbol of authority that allows one to command Imperial forces. Cox confirms it, saying that with this insignia, any Imperial unit will follow Jed's orders anywhere in the Empire. Jed hesitates and asks why Cox would give something so powerful to him, wondering aloud how Cox can be sure he'll use it properly. But Cox doesn't let him protest. He insists, saying he trusts Jed not to dishonor his name, but warns him to use the insignia only for the Empire's sake. If Jed ever uses it for personal benefit, Cox says that would be repaying goodwill with poison. Jed nods solemnly and says he'll remember that, and promises it will never happen. Cox chuckles, saying that Jed truly is different from the Arahans he's known before. As he turns to leave, he admits he never thought he'd see something like this in his lifetime. With everything resolved, Cox gathers his men, saying they'll head back now, and hopes to meet Jed again someday. Everyone bows respectfully as they part ways, and Jed smiles quietly, watching them go. Father Aahan thanks Jed for saving them, saying he's heard that everyone affected by the incident will be compensated, and praises Jed for accomplishing something truly great. Jed responds modestly, telling him he's being too kind. Aahan then asks if there's anything Jed desires in return. Jed immediately understands that the priest has seen through him, that Aahan knows his actions weren't purely out of faith. So Jed decides to be honest. He tells the priest that what he needs is holy water. Aahan grows serious and reminds him that holy water is meant only for healing the sick and fighting against evil. He asks Jed what he plans to use it for. Jed explains that he needs it to craft magical items, not necessarily to fight evil, but to save his own life. When Aahan asks what he means by that, Jed explains that although he's from the Arahan family, he was abandoned because he cannot control mana. But now he's been ordered to return home, and they both know what that implies: danger, rivalry, and bloodshed among his siblings. Aahan acknowledges this, noting how fierce the internal conflicts within the family are. Then he asks if mere magical items can truly protect Jed from such power struggles. Jed admits that he doesn't know, but says he intends to do everything he can to prepare. In his thoughts, he calculates that the maximum stat boost he can gain through elixirs right now is only 2 points. Since the lightning transformation skill requires a magic stat of 5, it would be a huge difference for him between a technique that can be used only with desperate willpower and one that can be activated freely. Aahan stays silent for a moment, gazing down into his reflection in the teacup. Then he says that he's heard rumors about Jed before, about how he defeated that notorious slave trader who was secretly backed by the Arahans. Perhaps, Aahan says, it was divine will that this same Arahan came to Myers to protect the Lord's sanctuary. Maybe helping him now is also part of the Lord's plan. He then opens a small box he had kept aside and explains that he made these bottles of holy water over a long time, pouring all his divine power into them. Their strength, he says, depends on how much holy energy they hold, and these are among his finest creations. The bottles glow softly with radiant, healing energy. Even Jed is astonished, feeling the warmth and purity emanating from them. He thanks the priest sincerely for the precious gift. Aahan smiles and adds one last thing, offering a small personal blessing and wishing that the Lord's grace will always stay with Jed. Later, inside his room, Jed lays out all the items he's collected and just stares at them in disbelief. For a moment, he wonders if he's dreaming. The item he'd once wanted so badly while playing the game is now right in front of him, the priest's mark. He keeps repeating it to himself, half in awe, half in amusement. The priest's mark, a priest's personal guarantee. It might not sound like much at first, but in this world, it carries enormous weight. After all, The cathedral's influence exists because the emperor himself built a system where morality and conscience reign supreme, which means, in a way, a priest's guarantee is practically the emperor's own. Jed realizes just how powerful this little mark is. With it, he won't have to worry about being hunted or suddenly arrested, and more importantly, no one can just kill him outright. In the brutal family power struggle that awaits him, that single mark gives him a massive edge. He figures Johann must have known exactly what he was doing when he handed it over. He looks over his collection again, the investigator's insignia and the priest's mark. Together, they're the best protection he could possibly hope for before returning home. Anyone who wants him dead will have to think twice, and with these in hand, he can rely on Imperial help anywhere in the Empire. Just looking at them fills him with reassurance. Then his gaze shifts to the small box beside him, the bottles of holy water. He recalls how, in the game, Johann's holy water had only about a 20% success rate. But this time, these were made with special care. 3 bottles of holy water, 1 demonic essence. That's all he's got. He mutters to himself that it'd be nice to succeed on the first try. He opens 1 bottle, takes a deep breath, and starts the process. If he runs out, he can always come back for more, he tells himself. As the holy water flows over the dark, pulsating essence, there's a sudden flash of light. The essence changes, transformed completely. Success. Jed's eyes widen, and he can't hold back a grin. He actually did it on the first try. Without hesitation, he gulps it down. A faint shimmer spreads through his body, and soon after, a system notification appears. Magic stat increased by +1. Current magic 4. Just as he predicted, he laughs out loud, barely able to contain his excitement. If the next one works too, that means his magic stat will hit 5. 2 bottles left, 1 essence. He rubs his hands together, muttering little prayers of please, please, as he pours another bottle onto the essence. And once again, the light flashes. Success. Jed nearly jumps up from his seat. He can't believe it. 2 successes in a row. He laughs and shouts to himself that this is insane. Out of 3, he's nailed 2 on the first try. Maybe that rumor about Johann spending an entire week perfecting the holy water was true after all. With the last bottle of holy water glowing faintly in his hand, Jed hesitates for a moment. He thinks to himself that, with this much divine power packed into it, it's practically like having an extra life, something too valuable to waste. But he decides it's worth it. Once he gulps it down, a rush of warmth spreads through him, and another notification appears before his eyes. His magic has reached 5. A new message pops up, additional magic available. Lightning transformation greatly enhances the caster's physical abilities. Gains shield effect proportional to magic power. Jed just stares at it for a second, then bursts out laughing. He can't even contain the excitement. The tension he'd been carrying vanishes instantly. He says to himself that, if lightning transformation had required magic 10 instead, he'd probably be crying right now. The sheer relief makes him laugh even harder. He sits there, grinning like a kid, thinking this is actually more fun than playing the game itself. The next morning, Lou is waiting for him, flipping through some notes. Lou says he's been looking for those one-eyed, white-haired people that Jed mentioned, and there are about 40 of them in total, not as many as expected. Jed agrees, saying that sounds about right. Lou explains that he gathered most of them in one place by offering money, and 34 actually showed up. So, the person Jed is looking for has to be among the remaining 6. When Jed asks if he's found them, Lou proudly says of course, and even notes down their exact locations. They can probably find the target by tomorrow. Jed grins, impressed, and tells him that'll make things a lot easier. Lou, clearly fishing for approval, says this is basic work for him. He can handle much harder tasks too. Then he asks, half jokingly but half hopeful, whether Jed thinks he's capable enough. Jed doesn't answer right away. He looks at Lou for a moment, then finally says that Lou doesn't need to try so hard. He already knows he's smart, and more importantly, Jed tells him that he'll take responsibility for him and his sister till the end. After all, they're his first real companion. That line hits both Lou and Lisa right in the heart. Their eyes start tearing up instantly, and Jed can't help but sigh, saying they shouldn't get emotional over something that should be normal. He even jokes that there must be something wrong with them, maybe a disease of oversensitivity. Just then, a woman approaches them. She looks at Jed and asks if those red eyes mean he's Mr. Jed Arahan. Jed raises a brow and asks how she knows him. The woman laughs and says that if anyone in Myers doesn't know who Jed Arahan is right now, they must be a spy. Apparently, word has spread fast. The young Arahan who punished the fraudsters, protected the cathedral, and saved Father Johann. As Jed glances around, he notices all the people looking at him, whispering. For a moment, he thinks everyone's staring because of his red eyes. But now he realizes there's another reason entirely. People are murmuring excitedly all around him. That's Jed Arahan. Hey, look, it's that guy, the one who saved the cathedral. And as he walks through the street, even though he tries to keep a straight face, Jed can't help but smirk just a little. As Jed walks through the streets, whispers ripple through the crowd around him. Some people stare wide-eyed, others lean close to each other, muttering nervously. One man says something about how they shouldn't look directly at an Arahan, because making eye contact could kill you. Another replies that it's fine. Jed's supposed to be the Lord's messenger, after all. Someone else adds that they always thought Arahans were ruthless, but maybe not all of them are like that. Lu glances around, clearly confused by the sudden attention, while Lisa clings to his arm, whispering that she's scared. Then the whole crowd starts speaking in unison, their voices overlapping. They thank Jed for protecting the Myers Cathedral, saying they'll remember his good deeds for generations. Some even bow their heads in respect. Jed, however, feels completely overwhelmed. He thinks to himself that he's faced plenty of crazy situations, but this level of attention is just embarrassing. Trying not to make it obvious, he leans toward Lu and Lisa, quietly whispering that they should slip away before it gets worse. They start moving through the crowd, trying to keep things casual, when suddenly Jed's steps falter. A strange sensation hits him. His instincts sharpen, his body tenses. Something feels off. His eyes scan the people around him until he spots a figure standing just beyond the crowd. White hair, one eye, lacto chervil. Jed instantly understands. The person he's been searching for is right there. Jed suddenly stops in his tracks, eyes narrowing. He pushes through the crowd, telling everyone to move aside. Something had caught his attention, that figure again. Without a second thought, he rushes ahead, but by the time he reaches the spot, the person's gone. Lu catches up, a bit out of breath, and asks what happened. Jed mutters that he saw him, the one they've been searching for, but the guy vanished before he could get a better look. Without wasting time, Jed calls out to Leo, asking for the closest location among the 6 possible hideouts they'd marked earlier. Leo immediately responds, and they all take off running through the narrow streets. As Jed sprints ahead, he's already thinking through the possibilities. If Lacto really intends to escape, he's not going to make it easy. A blacksmith of his level probably has a dozen ways to disappear without a trace. Lu shouts directions while running beside him. A left turn at the end of the road, then straight toward a tall, worn-out building. Room 203. They rush up the stairs and burst into the room, only to find a frightened man sitting on the floor. The poor guy immediately starts bowing, begging for more time to pay his rent. Jed barely spares him a glance before leaping straight out the window and landing below. He tells Lu to move on to the next location. Lu yells after him, calling him a crazy bastard, but still follows. They check one house after another, each time finding the wrong person. Frustration builds with every dead end until Lu points toward another spot. Basement level 1, left side room. This time, Jed pauses for a moment. Something feels off. His instincts buzz. He quietly tells Lu to go upstairs and wait. The air feels heavy, dangerous. He can almost feel the presence of magic in the walls. If Lacto really stayed here, it wouldn't be surprising if the place was rigged. A master blacksmith on the run wouldn't leave his back unguarded. Without hesitation, Jed activates magic lightning transformation. Blue sparks crackle across his body as he steps forward. A second later, a blinding explosion tears through the room. The system notification flashes before his eyes. Magic lightning transformation deactivated. Trait, Immortal Challenger activated. When the smoke clears, Jed notices the faint glow of blue fire licking at the debris. Blue flames, not something you see every day. Even for advanced magic tools, producing blue fire requires enormous energy. But this, just a simple trap created it. Lu rushes down, shouting to check if Jed's okay, but Jed barely hears him. He's too busy analyzing. Blue fire is supposed to be a superior flame attribute, something even high-circle mages struggle to produce. If Lacto can make this kind of explosion with a trap, his skill level is beyond anything Jed expected. He mutters in frustration, looking around at the wreckage. Everything's blown to pieces. If not for Immortal Challenger, he would have been dead instantly. He knows that trait well. He used it countless times back in the game. Simple, with Immortal Challenger, no one can one-shot kill him. Still, the fact that it even triggered means that explosion wasn't a joke. He thought it would be something around a 4th or 5th circle level blast. But for Immortal Challenger to activate, it means he just survived something far beyond that. Jed stared at the scorched floor, thinking that trusting the trait had been risky. Dying once hadn't felt good at all, and he realized he absolutely had to catch Lacto and make him his ally. Lu paced nearby, frustrated, telling Jed that it was ridiculous they were being treated like suspects when they were clearly victims. Jed shrugged and explained that since they were the only ones at the scene, if they couldn't prove it was a trap, they'd look guilty. He also pointed out that being from the Arahan family and having fire magic didn't help their case. Jed crouched to inspect the debris, noting that the explosion had burned everything, leaving no evidence. Lu asked what they should do next, whether to escape before the Imperial army arrived or seek help from the Bahal family. Jed shook his head and said it was better not to involve them, explaining that the Black Mirror Corps would react strongly. Lu understood immediately. Suddenly, a voice announced that Meyer's local garrison General Madden was demanding Jed come out immediately. Jed told Lu and Lisa to stay put, saying he'd handle it alone. Lu tried to protest, but Jed had already stepped outside. The soldiers immediately noticed him, and someone shouted to restrain him. Another soldier hesitated, pointing out that Jed had a priest's mark. Jed confirmed it, explaining that Father Johann of Meyer's Cathedral had given it to him. Madden realized his mistake, apologizing for not recognizing it sooner. Jed waved it off. Madden introduced himself and asked if Jed had been at the site of the explosion, since his name had come up in witness statements. Jed calmly explained that he had been caught in the explosion himself, confirming that he was a victim rather than a suspect. Madden asked why he had been there, clarifying that it was just procedural. Jed explained that he had been searching for someone and had accidentally walked into the trap, admitting that he had been as surprised as anyone else. Madden nodded, saying he understood. Jed thought to himself that thanks to the priest's mark, no matter how suspicious he looked, Madden couldn't treat him like a criminal. He realized this might actually be a blessing in disguise. Having the local garrison on his side would make finding the hidden lacto much easier. Jed asked Madden if he could possibly lend some help. Madden explained that the Imperial Army couldn't act on personal matters and that public authority couldn't be wasted without justification. Jed considered this for a moment, then showed his investigator's insignia, asking if that would count as justification. Madden's eyes widened in surprise, asking how Jed had come to possess it. Jed explained that Investigator Cox had given it to him, saying that displaying it would allow him to receive assistance from Imperial forces. Madden nodded, acknowledging that under Imperial law, they were required to cooperate with insignia holders. Still, he thought to himself, a priest's mark and an investigator's insignia. What kind of Arahan was this? Jed reminded him that this wasn't just a personal matter. It was about catching the perpetrator of the explosion, something the local garrison should naturally handle. The garrison saluted immediately and promised full cooperation. Jed thought to himself that the priest's mark functioned as an exemption right, while the investigator's insignia acted as a command right. He instructed them to start by drawing the perpetrator's appearance and to find someone suitable. Madden assured him it would be done immediately. Lu opened a window nearby, making some weird faces as he started working on it. By the next morning, the face was plastered on a poster across the city, a bounty of 50,000 gold coins with instructions for informants to report to the elm tree outside the south gate, warning that if the perpetrator wasn't found in 3 days, the city would be sealed and searched. Onlookers murmured among themselves, impressed by the bounty and comparing the sketch to the bomber from yesterday. One man stayed silent, staring at the poster and wondering if the drawing had misrepresented him, but he quickly decided it must have been deliberately drawn differently. Lacto, disguised among the crowd, watched the posters and thought to himself, but why on earth? He noticed people around commenting on Jed's determination, and he wondered if Jed actually wanted to meet him. He thought about the danger, realizing that if luck ran out, things could get bloody. As he left, Lacto told himself he'd understand Jed's plan when they finally met. He mused over how many cities he'd crossed while being a fugitive and thought he might be ready to put an end to this life. He had lived long enough and had no regrets. Among the crowd, he tried to stay hidden and observe. Suddenly, a voice from behind warned him that his disguise was excellent but to act naturally, or soldiers would swarm him. Lacto asked who it was, and Jed introduced himself, expressing relief at finally meeting Lacto in person. Lacto asked why Jed had been looking for him, and Jed suggested they move to a safer location first. Once they were clear, Jed revealed his full identity, stating that he was the 7th heir of the Arahan family. Lacto also revealed himself, and Jed mentioned he already knew Lacto's name. Lacto questioned why Jed had sought him out if he already knew him. Jed explained that the reason for seeking a legendary blacksmith wasn't simple. He wanted to hire Lacto as Arahan's exclusive craftsman. Jed reflects on how games and reality are worlds apart, especially when it comes to equipment. In a game, he just needs to double-click and the item's equipped, simple. But in real life, he has to put everything on himself, check how it feels, compare stats, and even think about comfort and weight. Most of the magic gear being sold is made for adults, which makes things even trickier. No matter how great the stats look, if it doesn't fit right, it's basically useless. That's exactly why he needs Lacto. A blacksmith like him could craft gear that fits perfectly, adjust it as Jed's stats grow, and even make specialized tools for specific situations. So Jed decides he has to bring this man over to his side. He starts talking to Lacto, saying how warhorses are born to run and swords are meant to be used, then asks what someone of the Serval bloodline intends to live for. Lacto doesn't answer right away, staying quiet. Jed keeps going, saying that the greatest craftsman working for the greatest family would mean Serval's legendary craft could be passed down to future generations, that their history wouldn't die. He calls it the mission Lacto was meant to fulfill. Lacto listens and admits it sounds like a beautiful dream, but trails off when mentioning his family. Before he can finish, Jed cuts in, saying he already knows the Servals were falsely accused. That makes Lacto look up in surprise. Jed goes on to promise that he'll clear their name, that with Arahan's backing, he can make it a reality. Lacto looks at him skeptically and asks if Jed even knows what really happened in the Serval massacre. Jed admits he doesn't, and Lacto asks how he can be so sure they were framed. Jed doesn't respond immediately. The Serval incident happened long before the events of the game he remembers, so all he ever learned about it were vague lines from NPC conversations, something about a failed rebellion and the family being wiped out by Imperial forces. Still, he tells Lacto that even without knowing the full story, he knows what kind of people the Servals were. They were a family devoted entirely to crafting superior magic tools, not scheming for power. He adds that rebelling would have made no sense, especially when the Emperor himself was both a sword master and an archmage, with the central army full of elite knights and mages right below him. Jed already knew that even if Arahan and Baal joined forces, they could never defeat the Emperor. The man was immortal, the eternal ruler of the world. The idea that Serval had ever plotted rebellion was absurd. He asks Lacto to tell him the full story of what really happened, assuring him that he has no doubt it was a false accusation. Lacto stays silent for a moment, closing his eyes as if weighing whether to speak. Then he sighs and asks if Jed knows about the Martin family. Jed tells him that he does, the second-ranked mage family, known for their strength. Lacto agrees and explains that Martin had always been one of their main trading partners, and that they were obsessed with surpassing Arahan. Jed admits that while that was their dream, it was never realistic. Arahan's prestige was simply too high. Lacto continues, saying that things took a turn for the worse when the Billy family got involved. Jed looks puzzled and repeats the name to himself, remembering that the Billis were once a mediocre mage family who somehow rose rapidly to rival Martin by the later stages of the story. Now intrigued, he asks what exactly happened back then. But Lacto only tells him that there was never any chance to explain. No time, no opportunity. Jed nods slowly, starting to grasp the kind of situation it must have been. But deep down, a thought lingers. Was Arahan really uninvolved? If his own family had played a part, bringing Lacto back could be dangerous. Arahan never traded with Serval. They might have seen them as competition for supplying top-grade magic tools to other noble houses. And if the Black Mirror Corps had been involved, it would have been the perfect cover-up. No trace left behind. He reminds himself not to jump to conclusions, deciding to hold back judgment until he knows more. Jed tells Lacto that if mages were responsible, Arahan can help resolve the matter. Lacto asks if he can really stand by those words. Jed answers that he will, promising to keep his word and extending a hand toward him. Lacto hesitates, staring at the hand in silence. Inwardly, he tells himself that maybe it doesn't matter anymore, that placing his hopes in someone one last time might not be so bad. Finally, he reaches out and shakes Jed's hand, agreeing to go with him as long as Serval's techniques and legacy can live on. And just like that, the forgotten craftsman and the determined heir form a fragile bond, one built on hope, doubt, and the promise of redemption. Jed turns to the group and tells them it's time to leave. With his first companion now by his side, Baal's white horse carrying them forward, the investigator's insignia and priest's mark in his possession, and the last living bloodline of Serval traveling with him, he wonders how much all of this will truly mean once he returns to Arahan. Still, as he clenches his fist and lets a faint smile cross his face, he tells himself that maybe, just maybe, he can pull it off. Later, in the western region's golden city of Nika, Lu can hardly contain his excitement. Everything around him glitters with wealth and luxury, the city practically glowing under the sunlight. He keeps looking around in awe, unable to believe such a place really exists. Jed teases him a little, asking if he's never been to Nika before despite his trading background. Lu explains that the city is usually off-limits for small and medium traders, reserved mostly for the big trading companies. Lisa can't stop pointing at all the golden buildings, her eyes wide with amazement. Even Lacto looks impressed, admitting that though he's been here before, the city has changed so much it's almost unrecognizable. Jed listens, nodding thoughtfully, and quietly observes that Nika feels colder than the south, but has a certain warmth in its energy. Lively, stylish, and buzzing, like walking through Gangnam. Everywhere they go, people's eyes are drawn to Bal's white horse. Its bright blue eyes and noble posture stand out even in a city this grand. Jed notices the stairs and thinks that the horse might be a little too eye-catching to bring into Arahan unnoticed. He decides they should find a place to stay for now. Once they settle at a small inn, Lu wonders why they aren't heading straight to Arahan yet. Jed reminds him that there's still a week before the deadline and says he has somewhere important to go alone. Lu is surprised but quickly realizes Jed has already made up his mind. Jed tells them it might take several days, maybe even a week, and asks them to take care of things while he's gone. Buy food nearby, look after Jinju, and avoid wandering too far, since it's easy to get lost in a city like this. Lu grins, joking that even though he's not a child, he really might lose his way here. Jed just laughs, thanks him, and steps outside. The moment he's out, the streets of Nika overwhelm him with their shine and movement. Merchants shout, coins jingle, and the air itself seems thick with the scent of gold. Jed looks around, feeling the weight of opportunity and danger in every direction. No matter how bright a city shines, there's always a shadow hiding somewhere beneath it. Jed thinks about that as he walks through the Golden City. For every person who strikes gold here, there are probably 10 who end up with nothing. People who came chasing dreams and ended up swallowed by the city's glittering false promises. Somewhere out there, he figures, must be places that hold those failures. As he's thinking, a cheerful voice greets him, surprised to see an Arahan heir walk into such a small shop. The owner is almost stumbling over his own words in excitement. Jed doesn't waste time on small talk. He just asks for a pair of glasses with black lenses. The shopkeeper hesitates, a little confused why someone of Jed's status would want something so plain and cheap, even calling it a commoner's color. Jed ignores the comment and simply gestures again, making it clear what he wants. The shopkeeper gives in quickly, fussing a bit but agreeing to fetch the glasses. Jed looks around the shop in the meantime and notices a set of worn-out work clothes hanging in the corner. He points at those next. The shopkeeper tells him those aren't for sale, they're just old uniforms. But Jed insists. He offers to trade the nice clothes he's wearing for them and only asks to buy a single pair of shoes along with it. Before the owner can even process that, someone nearby starts yelling insults, calling Jed a beggar and telling him to leave. Jed doesn't react. He just steps outside quietly. Once he's out, he exhales and glances at his reflection in one of the golden walls nearby. The polished surface gleams back at him, showing a ragged, scruffy man that nobody would ever mistake for a noble. He smirks a little at his own appearance and thinks to himself that it's perfect. He looks exactly like a beggar now. And with that disguise complete, he mutters under his breath, ready for the next step. It's time to meet the man known as the king of the back alleys. Under the night sky, with a few rats scurrying around, Jed sits calm and tells himself it's time to move. As he walks, he notices people trailing him. Wherever he goes, more faces gather. Jed thinks those watchers are nothing but vultures, exactly 7 of them now, and notes that his vision is limited to only a few meters ahead. He admits he's hungry and mentally kicks himself for not bringing jerky, but figures those scavengers would have pounced if he had. Suddenly, one of the men steps right in front of him and starts taunting, asking where he crawled out from. Jed stays quiet. The man warns that keeping silent won't help him survive here. Jed sizes the situation up, then acts like a beggar and asks if anyone has food because he's starving. One thug laughs and says they'll make sure he dies before he starves. The thug rushes Jed from behind, but Jed dodges easily. The attacker mutters that Jed's fast, but that's when everyone else leaps in. Jed turns, scans each opponent, and starts striking in quick, economical motions. One by one, the thugs go down before they can coordinate. The onlookers gape as Jed laughs. Then the remaining men shout and tumble to the ground just as quickly. Jed notes to himself that, with a strength of 70, even light hits send them flying. He asks if the fallen are okay, teasing that it would have taken only a piece of bread to avoid this. One groggy thug calls Jed a psychopath and warns that his organization will have him killed quietly. Jed replies that, if that's the plan, he might as well take over the organization instead. The thug pulls a knife and tries again, but once more he can't land anything on Jed. Jed's movements are too precise, too calm. The streets of the Golden City don't expect someone like him. The guy just laughs, clearly amused that Jed dodged his strike, and mutters that this isn't some ordinary opponent. The others call him their squad leader, which instantly grabs Jed's attention. He quietly repeats the word squad leader to himself and thinks that catching such a big fish on his first day might just fast-track his plans. One of the bystanders yells that Jed should show some respect because the man standing before him is none other than Lord Kinjara, the legendary assassin who once made the whole of Nika tremble. The others warn Jed to beg for his life if he wants to live. Jed, instead, just slips into his fighting stance and mocks the situation, saying that if this legendary assassin is only a beggar squad leader now, Maybe his legend was oversold. That jab gets under Kinjara's skin. The assassin grits his teeth, furious at Jed's arrogance, and rushes forward. But his strikes keep missing. Jed weaves between every blow. Kinjara pauses mid-fight, realizing the kid actually has potential. He admits grudgingly that if Jed lived long enough, he might have become strong someday. Jed, still calm, thinks to himself how wild it feels to get a talent review from someone who's basically a world-class killer. But Kinjara says this next move will be different. He channels mana, a lot of it. Jed immediately senses the surge and realizes this guy's control is at least fourth circle level. He had assumed the legendary assassin talk was an exaggeration, but now it's starting to sound legit. For an unaffiliated killer, reaching that level without a noble family's support is seriously impressive. Kinjara laughs darkly, saying that Jed should have known his place, and then spreads his aura like a storm before charging again. The air distorts with pressure, and even though the assassin's speed blurs, Jed stays unshaken, or maybe Kinjara just thinks he's frozen in fear. He decides to test it for real, striking from above. Suddenly, 3 blades come down at once. Jed barely reacts in time. The knives clash against each other when he moves out of range. The assassins freeze for a second, stunned that he dodged a perfectly synchronized triple attack. They demand to know if he's a knight or a mage. That's when Jed finally pieces it together. They're not one person at all, but triplets. The Kinjara triplets. He notices they look similar, but each one gives off a distinct mana signature. Now it all makes sense. The legendary assassin title wasn't about one man, but 3 working as one. Jed realizes the assassins were masking themselves with mana, so their presence didn't register at first. He picks out their names, Dra, Je, and Ki, and mutters to himself that his 100 perception means nothing when his magic is only 5. He tells himself he has to push harder, and the triplets rush in again. One of them laughs, calling Jed lucky and saying he won't dodge twice. Jed answers by igniting his electric aura and activating magic lightning transformation. Electricity crackles across his body, and the air snaps with energy. The assassins freeze, eyes widening at Jed's red gaze. They mutter about why an Arahan heir would be here and suddenly realize they've walked into a trap. Panic spreads, and someone shouts for everyone to run. At the same moment, the system notifies Jed that trait Relentless Challenger has activated, temporarily boosting all his stats by +10 and unlocking more magic. With those boosts, the assassins panic and try to flee, but Jed's lightning follows with instant speed. Bolts strike them down as they run. They can't escape. Jed moves in, thinking through the power he just used. He figures that second-tier lightning packed far more punch than his previous magic allowed. His effective magic power felt like 15, and notes that following the exact motions from the game without needing long chance gave him a huge edge. Then someone yells, calling others over. Jed freezes, hoping it's not the city guard. Footsteps and voices begin converging, and he decides to melt back into the shadows. Before vanishing, he grabs one of the fallen assassins and drags the body away to hide it. He knows the attack was loud and messy. Keeping low is the only option. From the darkness, he watches while the arriving people start investigating. One guard notices blood on the ground and begins to follow the trail. Jed curses under his breath, thinking the assassin may have left that trail on purpose. He'd hoped to wrap this up quietly, and now the trail might lead right to him. Jed realizes there's no way out now, so he decides to step forward and show himself. The guards instantly raise their weapons and shout for him to stop. He waves a hand casually and says they should focus on cleaning up the scene instead of pointing spears at him. The guards blink, confused for a moment, then one of them straightens up in shock. He quickly says that they meant no disrespect, that they were investigating an explosion they'd heard during patrol, but adds that Jed doesn't look like young Master Tunda. Jed recalls the name in his mind, thinking that Tunda is the 6th heir of Arahan. Out loud, he introduces himself as Jed Arahan, the 7th heir. Internally, he notes that it's not surprising they don't recognize him. After all, he's been locked away for so long. The guards immediately bow, apologizing again and again. Jed keeps a calm expression and says if they're after the one responsible for the explosion, he saw them fleeing in the opposite direction. They thank him for the information and rush off. Jed exhales lightly and smirks to himself, thinking how easily everything was resolved with just a few words. His Arahan status really carries weight in this city. He turns his attention back to the unconscious assassin nearby and checks his pulse. Still alive, though barely. Jed thinks that lightning strike hit a lot harder than expected, then hoists the man up and moves him to a quieter place. After a while, the assassin stirs, blinking weakly. He recognizes Jed and murmurs that he's an Arahan heir. Jed tilts his head, thinking, finally awake. Huh? Then he tells the man to call the others out. Within seconds, the remaining assassins appear from the shadows, dropping their weapons and bowing deeply. One of them pleads for forgiveness, saying they didn't realize who he was, and that they regret showing hostility toward an Arahan heir. They beg him to spare their brothers, their voices shaking as they press their foreheads to the ground. Jed looks at them, a bit surprised to see assassins crying. He tells them it's strange, people who take lives for a living suddenly weeping over their comrades. One of the assassins says they only learned to kill so they could survive. Another chimes in, swearing they only targeted corrupt nobles and criminals who preyed on commoners, never innocent people. Jed listens quietly. When they finish, he reminds them that they tried to kill him not long ago. The leader says it's because the alleys are their territory. Strangers who show up are often enemies trying to seize control, and many of their friends have died because of it. That's why they reacted the way they did. The assassins admit they've truly committed a mortal sin. Jed thinks to himself that there are probably plenty of people besides him trying to control Nika's underground forces. He then asks them if it's really true that they haven't killed innocent people. The assassins swear it on their brothers' lives. Jed thinks that's impressive. If it's true, their contracts probably never paid much. The assassins explain that what they really care about is keeping their family and brothers safe, a lesson drilled into them by their master. Jed reflects that murder is evil, but to commoners oppressed by nobles, the Kinjara brothers must have been the only hope. Jed sets a condition. He wants them to guide him to their boss, and in return, he'll help heal their brother. The assassins are stunned and go silent. They insist it's impossible, saying they can't betray their comrades for survival. Jed reassures them that he only wants to meet their boss to buy information, with no intention of causing harm. The assassins counter that everyone says the same thing, yet their boss has never sold information once. Jed smiles slightly and tells them he knows. The assassins are taken aback. Jed promises on the Arahan name that even if the deal fails, he won't harm their comrades. The assassins hesitate, pointing out that they don't trust Noble's words. Jed thinks that's fine. If they had trusted him instantly, he might have doubted their sincerity. He then tells them there's no other way. They should restrain him. The assassins look shocked. Jed continues, saying they can hold a blade to his throat and blindfold him if they want. That's the only way they'll trust him. The assassins begin to protest, but Jed interrupts, saying that if they still refuse to trust him, he won't hand over their brother either. He reminds them that trust goes both ways. The assassins exchange glances, then nod. They agree to guide him to their boss, but first, they blindfold him and tie his hands. Jed thinks about how he'll have to navigate blindfolded, realizing it's finally time to meet the king of the back alleys. 2 hours later, the night has grown even darker. As they travel, Jed can't help thinking that somehow, it feels like they're just going in circles. Jed tells the assassins to stop wasting energy and asks if they're looking for the Black Mirror Core. He warns them that if that's the case, they should guide him directly, because the Corps would already know their boss's location. The assassins insist even the Black Mirror Corps wouldn't know where their boss is. Jed shakes his head and explains that they clearly don't understand Arahan. From his experience, the Black Mirror Corps would know not just their boss's location, but the full extent of their reach. The assassins are surprised and just nod. Jed tells them again to just guide him. The assassins murmur, worried, asking if the Black Mirror Corps is nearby. Jed admits he doesn't know, but adds that no matter what they do, they couldn't even touch the Corps' toes. He's not underestimating them. They're on a completely different level. The assassins nod, acknowledging this, and soon they reach an underground cavern. One of the assassins tells him they've arrived. The boss, Eddie, the king of the back alleys, asks sharply why Jed is there and whether the rules were forgotten. The assassins quickly apologize, explaining that Jed said he wanted to deal directly with the boss. Jed thinks to himself that this must be the king of the back alleys. Eddie snaps at them to remove Jed immediately, but the assassins hesitate. They can't act against him. Jed produces a bottle of holy water and tells the assassins to make Eddie drink it. The assassins are shocked, stammering, unsure what it is. Jed explains that it's holy water and will heal him quickly, reasoning that since they've kept their promise, he should keep his. Jed thinks it's a bit wasteful, but he can't think of a faster way to heal Eddie. The assassins quietly thank him as they make Eddie take it. Once Eddie feels better, Jed tells him he wants to make a deal. Eddie initially scoffs, telling him to get lost, but Jed calmly reaches for the book Eddie had been engrossed in and takes it. Eddie's anger flares as he shouts at the audacity, then notices Jed's identity and mutters in shock. He's an Arahan. He glares at the assassins, accusing them of betrayal. One of the brothers quickly defends themselves, explaining that it's not betrayal. Jed promised he wouldn't harm their boss or comrades. The king laughs and tells Jed that he's heard that kind of noble bullshit many times before, that nobles are all just bastards. Jed thinks to himself that Eddie, the king of the back alleys, is a genius among geniuses who never forgets anything he's seen. Eddie tells Jed that he's young, but he's not Tunda Arahan. His face is unfamiliar. Jed thinks Eddie has him figured out. He's Arahan's youngest, the one abandoned in detention. Jed confirms this and remarks mentally that it's surprising Eddie knows even that much about him. Eddie acknowledges that Jed wants to make a deal, but claims he doesn't want anything from him. Jed asks how he can be so certain without even hearing him out. Eddie scoffs and says that nobles' minds are predictable, offering gold coins or trying to clean up a commoner's status. He rhetorically asks if he's wrong. Jed remains silent. Eddie mutters that he knew it all along. Jed thinks about Eddie's exceptional intelligence, how he tried for government positions multiple times, only to be repeatedly blocked due to his lowly birth. This shaped him into someone who hates nobles and considers everyone else stupid. Jed smirks and notes mentally, just like in the game. Then a voice, presumably Eddie's, says that what he'll accept as the price for this deal isn't money or status laundering. Eddie confirms he won't go that far, then finally offers that he'll give information. Jed nods and tells him that he'll buy that information with information of his own. Eddie raises an eyebrow and says Jed's an interesting guy. Buying information with information? Jed tells him that's right, since that's the only thing Eddie actually wants. Eddie asks how he could possibly know that, and Jed thinks to himself that of course he knows. Making contact with Eddie from the mid-game is crucial, like finding a hidden piece in a game. Jed tells him he remembers everything he sees once. Eddie smirks and says he's pretty smart, but Jed shouldn't jump to conclusions. Jed doesn't argue. He just stays silent with that calm, unreadable expression. After a moment, he points out that Eddie clearly likes reading, but there's only one book in the room, which means he probably throws away the ones he's finished. Eddie laughs and says that's a good observation, asking what else Jed has figured out. Jed tells him that Eddie's already interested in making a deal. He could tell from the way Eddie subtly turned his body toward him. That catches Eddie off guard for a second, but he quickly recovers and admits he'll listen to what Jed has to say, saying that much time investment seems fair. Jed then explains that what he wants is information about Arahan, everything about his brothers, to be specific. Eddie assumes it's because of the family infighting and tells him that information can be money, weapons, or even a shield, but the key thing is, what will Jed pay with? Jed answers that he'll pay with information Eddie doesn't know. Eddie grins slightly and says he won't know that until he hears it. After all, he already knows most things. Jed coolly replies that he won't be telling him right now either. That annoys Eddie, who says this isn't much of a deal. Jed's info might be worthless. Jed shrugs and tells him it goes both ways, because when it comes to Arahan, he probably knows more than Eddie does. Eddie scoffs and says it's ridiculous. Jed only came looking for him because he was scared. Jed admits that he did come here thinking there might be something he didn't know, but if Eddie can't agree to the trading method, then there's no point continuing. In his mind, Jed thinks that every trade starts with understanding what the other party wants. He knows Eddie well, but Eddie knows almost nothing about him, and being a guy obsessed with information, Eddie won't be able to resist. So Jed decides to push a little. He turns around and casually says that since Eddie isn't interested in dealing, he'll just take his leave. Eddie doesn't respond, staying silent as Jed walks away. After walking quite a distance, Jed thinks that it's fine even if they don't make a deal right now. Thanks to meeting the Kinjara triplets, he met Eddie much earlier than expected, and that gives him more time to work with. Jed figures Eddie will contact him first anyway, so there's no need to rush. But before he gets too far, a voice calls out to him. One of the assassin triplets thanks him, saying their youngest recovered immediately thanks to the holy water he gave them. He mentions it didn't seem like ordinary holy water and bows deeply in gratitude. The triplets admit they feel ashamed for not trusting him earlier just because he's a noble. Jed tells them that sometimes there are decent nobles too, and that he's not the kind to break promises. Hearing that, one of the assassins actually tears up and says he's never seen a noble like Jed before. Most wouldn't have cared about their youngest's life. He shyly asks for Jed's name, and Jed simply tells him it's Jed Arahan. The assassin bows again, promising to remember it for life. As Jed watches them, he realizes he had his own prejudice against assassins. He thinks about how strong their loyalty is, how deeply they care for their comrades, and that maybe they're better people than he thought. Then he asks if they're the Kinzara everyone talks about, and they confirm it with a nod. Jed thinks to himself that reaching the fourth circle is impressive for assassins, and there are 3 of them. He figures if he can bring them to his side, they'd be a big help in the infighting later. So he tells them to come with him, which leaves the triplets visibly surprised. Not long after, Jed finds himself sitting in front of Eddie again. Eddie looks at him with mild amusement and remarks that he actually came back. In his head, Eddie assumes Jed must have realized how important information about his brothers is. He then asks what brought Jed back since he had acted disinterested and stormed off earlier. Jed calmly tells him that he wants to buy the Kinzara triplets. Eddie begins to respond, thinking it's about the information again, but stops midway, confused. He asks if Jed really came back for those guys instead of the info on his brothers. Jed tells him that he doesn't need that information, that no matter how he thinks about it, he'd just end up at a loss. Eddie is taken aback. He mutters that Jed must be crazy, then admits it's a tricky situation. The triplets are squad leaders in his organization, after all, and as the boss, he's not exactly eager to part with them. Jed tells Eddie that he's prepared to pay any reasonable price. Eddie smirks and says that whatever Jed considers reasonable will probably turn out to be far more expensive than he imagines. When Jed asks what kind of price he has in mind, Eddie tells him he wants everything Jed experienced after leaving the detention center. How he got out, what he did afterward, the whole story. In Eddie's mind, money doesn't mean much. Information that satisfies his curiosity is the only real currency. And the mysterious return of the youngest Arahan, once abandoned in detention, is exactly the kind of juicy story that would keep him awake at night. But Jed only gives him a calm look and says that his capacity is smaller than he thought. That hits Eddie like a slap. He glares and repeats, almost offended, asking if Jed really just called him small-minded. Jed nods, saying he expected Eddie to demand something more impressive, but then adds that everyone lives within their own limitations. That last line finally breaks Eddie's patience. He grabs Jed by the collar and snaps, calling him arrogant. He rants about how Jed only got where he is because of his noble birth, that he's got no real ability, just a lucky bloodline. But through all of Eddie's yelling, Jed stays perfectly calm, quietly holding his gaze. His silence makes the air heavier, and even Eddie starts to feel uneasy under that cold, steady stare. The triplets quickly step in, trying to calm things down, reminding their boss that Jed is an Arahan heir. That finally makes Eddie pause. He lets go, clears his throat awkwardly, and apologizes, saying he got a little too heated. Then, trying to recover his composure, he asks what kind of conditions Jed would set instead. Jed simply asks who Eddie thinks is standing in front of him. Eddie answers that it's an Arahan heir, but Jed points out that just a moment ago Eddie had called him sir. He asks if that was wrong. Eddie admits it wasn't, a little unsure where this is going. Jed then tells him that if he were in Eddie's position, he'd be thinking about how to use nobles rather than hating them. He says this is the perfect time for Eddie to do that. Eddie raises an eyebrow, asking if Jed is really suggesting that he use him. Jed nods and explains that he knows how obsessed Eddie is with information, but that the information one can gather from the shadows will always be limited. Eddie sighs and says that's just how things are. He can't help it. Jed shakes his head, telling him that he still doesn't understand. Eddie, starting to lose patience again, says Jed hasn't actually explained anything clearly. That's when Jed calmly tells him not to stay hidden in the dark anymore, to step into the light, and that he'll help him do it. Eddie looks at him like he's crazy. He says it's impossible, that Jed has no idea what he's talking about. Jed tells Eddie that he's willing to offer something concrete, a building in a prime location where Eddie can run his own detective agency. He explains that since nobles are the ones who move the world, Eddie will need to deal with them directly if he wants to gather real information. Eddie immediately shoots back that it's not about money. He insists he didn't fail to rise up because he lacked funds. It's because commoners aren't allowed to buy or sell property. Jed simply shrugs and tells him that's not a problem. He'll be the building's owner himself, and Eddie will just run his business there as a tenant. That catches Eddie off guard. He hesitates, trying to process what he just heard, and Jed keeps going, saying he'll even assign members of Arahan's magic corps to provide security for the place. He points out that, with those kinds of conditions, it's practically a perfect setup. Eddie can only manage a faint, uncertain, while Jed continues, explaining that this isn't charity, it's a partnership. Jed tells him he'll help Eddie step into the light and achieve what he wants, and in return, Eddie will provide him with information. Both sides benefit equally. In his mind, Eddie starts calculating. With this, he could finally access noble-level information, not just the scraps he gathers from beggars and the streets. If Arahan's magic corps really provides security, it'd be like having a fortress of information, a diamond fence protecting his operation. But can he really trust this offer? Still, the temptation is too strong. Eddie asks if Jed is truly serious about providing both the building and the security team. Jed confidently tells him he never breaks promises and points at the triplet assassins behind them as living proof. Eddie looks at them, once enemies, now quietly standing behind Jed, and realizes this noble really might be different. He knows an opportunity when he sees one. This is his best shot to climb higher than any commoner ever has. Without hesitating further, Eddie reaches out and shakes Jed's hand, agreeing to the partnership. Jed smiles, saying that Eddie made the right choice, but then reminds him that every deal needs a down payment. Eddie blinks, asking what kind of down payment he's talking about. Jed tells him plainly that he wants information about his brothers and the Kinzura triplets as the initial price. Eddie freezes for a moment, clearly caught off guard, but Jed just waits patiently, calm as ever, until Eddie finally nods, realizing the deal has already begun. Jed rides the white horse, feeling a sense of relief as he finally reaches Arahan Mansion, his friends and followers right behind him at the gate. Lou notices him and asks if he couldn't sleep last night, checking if he's okay. Jed teases him back, and Lou laughs, saying he's just excited. Jed thinks about the night he spent memorizing all the information Eddie had given him. Every detail was enough to make anyone gasp. Records of his brother's allied forces in the city, expenses, even the personal information of their servants. He wonders how Eddie collected all that and imagines that if he gave him wings, Eddie would fly even higher. Jed feels reassured but reminds himself that today is crucial, buying time to get stronger in Arahan's territory while navigating his brother's infighting. How he handles today will completely affect his position. He tells everyone to move in, but the guards at the gate order him to halt, dismount, and identify himself. Jed complies, and one of the guards recognizes him as young Master Jed, mentioning they received advance notice. Jed explains that he's returning by the family head's command and asks to be guided. The guard hesitates, pointing out that the people with him cannot enter. Jed vouches for them as his companions, but the guard insists that outsiders cannot enter without the family head's permission. Jed internally notes that this could get complicated from the very first step. He considers forcing entry but decides that breaking rules in Arahan's territory isn't wise. He asks Lou to wait for a moment and reassures him, while Lou responds with a cautious intuition about potential danger. Jed tells him not to worry, and also reminds the Kinzura triplets that he's counting on them. The guard finally allows them to proceed, telling Jed that the family head is waiting. Jed instructs them to lead the way, and in his mind, he steels himself, reminding himself to stay sharp and pragmatic. He tells himself not to get nervous. He's prepared as much as he can. From now on, he has to act flawlessly as an Arahan, the seventh youngest child, a mage who values pragmatism above all else. Jed reminds himself that he has to play his role perfectly and win the family head's favor. As he goes deeper into the mansion, he senses a powerful aura emanating from a figure who addresses him as youngest. Jed immediately bows and greets the family head, telling himself not to tremble. The Arahan head comments on how it must feel to return to the family after so long. Jed answers calmly that it feels exactly the same as before. The head presses for clarification, so Jed explains that the powerful aura and the bone-cutting cold remain unchanged. The head bursts into a booming, almost crazy laugh. The aura is so intense that Jed can feel it pressing against him, his ears ringing and vision blurring from the vibrations. The head remarks that it sounds like Jed can sense his father's aura, but Jed insists he couldn't possibly gauge the realm of an archmage. He notes that the head is one of only 2 archmages in the Empire, the one who killed his brothers to claim Arahan's throne, Janedine Arahan. Janedine comments on how much Jed has changed, recalling him as a weak child. Jed quickly counters that the word weak doesn't suit an Arahan, earning another loud laugh from Janedine, which only increases the overwhelming pressure in the room. Janedine reflects that there's no way his child could be powerless, noting that Jed has awakened lightning ki. This surprises Jed, but he calmly explains that he understands it's superior to the existing 4 main attributes. Janedine, intrigued, asks how Jed obtained such a power, noting that Arahan's history never records anyone gaining abilities beyond fire. Jed internally notes his surprise at Janedine's interest, then comments that it's not so shocking, given the infinite potential of Arahan blood. Janedine probes whether Jed was surprised at acquiring lightning ki, and Jed humbly says that such a rare and blessed power naturally belongs to Arahan. Janedine laughs again, praising Jed for saying exactly the right things. Jed inwardly groans, feeling his insides twist with each booming laugh, silently wishing it would stop. Janedine chuckles darkly, noting that it's been a while since he last laughed. He explains that he called Jed back because of lightning ki and wants him to research and develop it. If Jed can reach a meaningful level, Janedine claims, it will surpass any record in value. Jed thinks to himself that Janedine ultimately wants to add lightning ki to his achievements and is willing to use even his youngest child, barely returned alive, to do it. In a way, Jed realizes this works in his favor. If Janedine wants something, he won't kill him outright. Jed tells him that he will follow the family head's orders. But Janedine interrupts, signaling that there's more to address. Jed is taken aback as Janedine shifts to a more serious tone, reprimanding him for past misconduct. He asks whether Jed knew that the slave trader Dwido had connections to the Arahan family. Jed admits that he did. Janedine's anger spikes. He slams a fist and scolds Jed for executing the slave trader and using Bahal's men to do it. The aura of pressure intensifies, and Jed thinks to himself that the real game has now begun. The madman is showing his true colors. Jed insists that he did nothing harmful to the family, and that slave traders are entities that must eventually be cut off. He adds that since they go against the Emperor's goals, they could harm the family in the long run. Janedine's eyes burn red as he challenges Jed, saying that his reasoning is contradictory. He argues that slave traders provide significant long-term benefits and help manage the South's resources. Jed expected this response and carefully chooses his words, thinking about how to please the family head. He explains that in pragmatism, there are both dishonest and legitimate profits. Janedine scoffs, insisting that profit is profit and calling Jed's objection ridiculous. Jed internally notes that being 15, his stubbornness will be seen as a youthful mistake, something Janedine can forgive. He counters by asking why Arahan, as the Empire's top family, should accept dirty money. The family should only deal in the most brilliant gold coins, even if the currency is the same. After a pause, Janedine calls it sophistry and presses further, asking why Jed accepted Bahal's help, since Bahal is clearly the family's enemy. Jed calmly explains that Bahal operated under the Emperor's decree, and their paths merely overlapped. He did not actively seek or accept their assistance. Janedine scolds him, demanding how he could try to deceive him. He claims Jed accepted Bahal's invitation and even received the white horse as a gift, yet insists Jed did not actually get help. Jed trembles slightly and replies that he doesn't understand the situation. Janedine asks him to clarify. Jed explains that he was kidnapped, not invited, and that he upheld Arahan's pride in front of Bahal's family head. He adds that he returned with war spoils taken directly from the enemy's stronghold, not mere gifts. He wonders aloud why he is being scolded instead of praised, noting that Bahal's white horse, considered their exclusive property, now belongs to him. He thinks to himself that simply having an Arahan ride the horse elevates the family's reputation. In his mind, Jed repeats, "Believe it, believe it." 15-year-old Jed sincerely thinks this incident deserves praise. But then a tremendous aura descends, heavy and oppressive. Janedine's voice becomes deep and terrifying as he warns the youngest not to try deceiving him with smooth words. Jed can't help but panic far more than he should. This is intense. Do you want to see how Jed handles it? Smash that like button. 2000 in the next chapter drops.